The Trump administration continues to move swiftly to eliminate what President Trump calls anti-American ideology from America's cultural institutions. Yesterday, the latest executive order targeted the Smithsonian and the memorials and monuments overseen by the Department of the Interior. Joining us now to unpack what's going on is NPR culture correspondent Elizabeth Blair. Hi there.
Hi, Juana.
So, Elizabeth, just start if you can by telling us what this order says.
The order is called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. It's essentially calling for an overhaul of the Smithsonian and an evaluation of federal monuments. The Smithsonian is a vast complex that includes the Air and Space Museum, the Natural History Museum, the National Museum of the American Indian, the Cooper Hewitt in New York, and several other museums and research centers. The executive order claims that the Smithsonian has, quote, come under the influence of a divisive race-centered ideology, and then it promotes narratives that portray American and Western values as inherently harmful and oppressive. I talked to Jim Grossman, executive director of the American Historical Association. He says Trump's executive order is neither truth nor sanity.
It misrepresents the work of the Smithsonian, which is one of the great research institutions in the world. Arguing that the Smithsonian somehow misleads people, somehow is unpatriotic, somehow is saying things that are not true. That's simply not true.
Still, the order says no future federal dollars can be spent on anything at the Smithsonian that degrades, quote, shared American values. It also says that the as yet unbuilt Women's History Museum will not recognize men as women in any respect.
Elizabeth, how much authority can the U.S. president exert over the content in Smithsonian museums?
The Smithsonian is governed by a board of regents. It includes the Chief Justice of the United States and the Vice President. It also includes 3 senators, 3 representatives, and 9 citizen members appointed by Congress. So while the U.S. president is not a member of the board of regents, his VP is. The executive order says the Vice President will work with Congress to appoint citizens that agree with the administration, and it threatens to withhold federal funding, which is critical to the Smithsonian.
Right. Well, what does the Smithsonian have to say about all of this?
The Smithsonian has not yet released a statement.
Okay. We also mentioned federal monuments. What does the order have to say about them?
Trump's order asks the Department of the Interior to take a look at federal monuments to make sure they don't, quote, perpetuate a false reconstruction of American history or include any other improper partisan ideology. It also calls for reinstating monuments that have been removed to improperly minimize or disparage certain historical figures or events. The Interior Department has not yet responded to NPR's request for comment, but we presume he's talking about monuments that were torn down because many people found them offensive. After the murder of George Floyd, more than 150 Confederate symbols were removed across the United States.
That was NPR's Elizabeth Blair. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you.
Could have told Indians that. Same thing. Some of them did start off with, but then they got attitude. Say, no, we're going to take it all. We ain't going to leave you nothing. Right? Indians said, well, I thought we were going to share. I mean, that's what we sat down at Thanksgiving. I mean, and so we all work together and all like that. Well, I don't think that's a good idea. what I need to do is going back to giving you a good whipping, Chief. That's all it was. Chief said, there's plenty of land here for everybody. We got more land than we can take care of and whatnot. So, I mean, we welcome you and all like that. Well, no, I'm going to take it all. Give you a bottle of whiskey. That's what you're going to get out of the deal. Right.
Wow.
And that's what they did. And they admit that they did it. They wrote books about it, bragged about it. Yeah, how many Indians were killed today, Only good Indians are dead Indians.
The countdown is on for federally funded museums and institutions that have Native American human remains. In January of 2024, the Department of the Interior updated a law known as NAGPRA in order to expedite the return of those remains to Native American tribes within 5 years after decades of delays and broken promises. The Ohio History Connection is now doing an inventory of its own collection. It's one of the nation's largest, and it's collaborating with tribes to repatriate remains in an effort to meet the deadline. Adriana Martinez-Smiley from member station WYSO reports.
At the Ohio History Center, Neil Thompson guides me through an exhibit of the state's UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks.
This exhibit chronicles the 8 earthworks.
They're scaled images of ancient rock art, models of Ohio's environment centuries ago, and excavated items used in Native American rituals. But out of view are more than 6,500 Native American human remains from tribes that were forcibly removed from the state in the 19th century. The Ohio History Connection, the state's preservation hub, possesses the remains and runs the center in Columbus. It's actively consulting with the 45 tribes tied to the Ohio River Valley to repatriate their remains. The chief of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma, Glenna Wallace, says, work's been slow-moving.
Without question, this is a very delicate, but it is a crucial conversation and one that is very important to all of us. There is an urgency about it. It has been on the back burner for far too long.
The urgency Wallace is referring to are updates to the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, also known as NAGPRA. This law requires federally funded museums to identify Native American remains and funerary objects in their possession and work with the tribes from which they were taken to repatriate them. It passed in 1990, but last January, the U.S. Department of the Interior revised its regulations to streamline the repatriation process. It gave institutions 5 years to identify what's in their inventories and consult with tribal nations. That's a cumbersome process, says Stacia Kuseyeski, Chief Operations Officer of Ohio History.
Our NAGPRA staff is really cross-referencing the time of the ancestors, what time frame they're from, with the geography of where they came from, and then who would have been on that land.
Several tribal leaders say it's good to finally see progress on returning the remains, but they also find it difficult to navigate the new requirements. Tribal nations and museums foot most of the costs. Federal grants exist, but they're so competitive, some refer to NAGPRA as an unfunded mandate. Logan York, Historic Preservation Officer of the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma, says 4 of the 5 staffers dealing with its NAGPRA consultations aren't paid to do the work.
We are now on this timeline to make sure that our ancestors are treated with respect, but we have no more funding to make sure it's done correctly.
The Trump administration has not indicated there would be any change to NAGPRA. In a statement to NPR, Department spokesman Jordan Pfeiffer only says that Interior Secretary Doug Burgum looks forward to working with tribes on this and other issues. There are other concerns besides a lack of funding and time. Historic Ohio tribes' remains are scattered about the country. For example, Chief of the Shawnee Tribe, Ben Barnes, says it has to work with 26 states for NAGPRA consultations and only has 2 staff members to do it.
There's no single NAGPRA consult that's typical. Some can take years, some can take months, some can take weeks. Some collections are overseas, some are split collections. Some of the ancestors are loaned out to another institution.
Eastern Shawnee Chief Glenna Wallace says each tribe has their own approach to repatriation, but they are all looking for the same outcome.
Our belief is that those remains that spirit is not at rest. That spirit is not at ease until it goes back to Mother Earth. And that has not happened, and that's what needs to happen.
Wallace says working to reinter these remains is a challenge, but it's a challenge each tribe is capable of meeting. For NPR News, this is Adriana Martinez-Smiley in Dayton, Ohio.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place.
Former Utah Congresswoman Mia Love's fight against brain cancer unfortunately came to an end tonight.
Her family making that announcement on X, saying that she passed away peacefully in her home surrounded by family. Our Carol Makita has a look back on Love's legacy.
You have to figure out whether, if an opportunity comes, whether you're going to rise to the occasion or whether you're going to regret not taking up an opportunity.
Mia Love did take many of those opportunities and expressed gratitude for the support she received. She was proud to break barriers. Ludmilla Mia Bordeaux Love was born to Haitian parents in Brooklyn, New York. She became the first black person elected to Congress from Utah, the first Haitian American elected to Congress, and the first black woman elected to Congress as a Republican. She served as the U.S. representative for Utah's 4th Congressional District from 2015 to 2019. She was elected mayor of Saratoga Springs, Utah in 2010 after having served on its city council. She spoke at the 2012 Republican National Convention. She first ran for Congress in 2012, losing narrowly to incumbent Jim Matheson. She ran again in 2014, defeating Democratic opponent Doug Owens. She defeated Owens a second time to win re-election in 2016. Mia Love believed that she, as a Republican, could make a difference in the lives of Utahns.
I believe that the policies really lift people from the lowest common denominator up. They're compassionate policies. They're policies that give people a chance. Those are the policies that we say in America, no one's predestined to be poor.
She told Doug Wright in 2018 that she even pushed against the administration, bringing the ire of President Trump in order to create legislation.
I went against my own leadership so that we can make sure that we are the ones promoting policies and writing the policies in Congress, not letting the administration do that. That's not their job. Their job is to execute the laws that we write.
She was often outspoken, even with members of her own party.
I am pro-life. I'm unapologetically pro-life. Why not give women the option of having their choices when it comes to health care before they have to choose between keeping a life and ending a life? And the fact that I've got more issues with Republican men on this is absolutely absurd to me.
She lost re-election in 2018 to Democrat Ben McAdams. In 2019, Love was hired as a political commentator by CNN. Love was raised in the Catholic faith. She became a Latter-day Saint in 1998. She moved to Utah and married Jason Love in that same year. They have 3 children.
At least my children and history will say she dedicated her life to service, an honest service, compassionate service.
She was diagnosed with brain cancer in February of 2022. Surgery removed 95% of her tumor. In 2023, she participated in an immunotherapy clinical trial. But on March 1st of this year, her daughter said on social media that the treatments were no longer effective. Her family and friends were determined to enjoy the remaining time with her. Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson and Mia Love have been friends for 16 years.
I still have a voicemail that she left me, asking how I was doing, telling me how much she loved me, thanking me for being such a good friend to her. All she was doing in the middle of her pain and her health crisis that she was going through was to think of other people.
Mia Love is being remembered as a woman devoted to her faith, her family, and this country. Carol Makita, KSL 5 News.
Carol, thank you. Now, before passing, Mia Love wrote an op-ed in the Deseret News on her living wish for the America she knows. In the article published on March 11th, Mia Love says, what makes America great is the idea that people are free to work, live, choose, fail, and achieve. Love says we must fight to keep the America we know and love, and that her living wish is that the America she has known is the America people fight to preserve, and that everyone will do their part to ensure it'll be the America our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will inherit.
Mia Love's family says they are thankful for many good wishes, prayers, and condolences. They say information about funeral services and a public celebration of her life will be announced in the days to come. Stay with KSL for the latest on those details as we continue to cover her passing.
And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project 2025. I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
Time now for our series on democracy, where we hear a range of perspectives on how government should function, what led to this moment in American history, and where the country goes next. Our primary focus tonight is Project 2025, the conservative policy project authored by former Trump administration officials, which became a flashpoint during the presidential campaign. Angelo Carusone has studied that 900-page document. He's president of Media Matters, a progressive nonprofit focused on researching and analyzing news media, including disinformation and online ecosystems. I spoke with him days ago. Angelo Carusone, welcome to the NewsHour.
Thanks for having me.
You have emerged as an expert on Project 2025, this roadmap that then candidate Trump during the campaign repeatedly disavowed. Now, the architect of Project 2025 was just quoted as saying the way that Trump has implemented it has exceeded his wildest dreams. When you look at the way President Trump has expanded his executive authority, he's dismantled federal agencies, he's purged the federal workforce, how much is Project 2025 guiding this work?
What Project 2025 provided was sort of the core story here, which was to who's the bad guy, and that was the deep state. And they basically said essentially most of the federal government, most of the federal workers were part of this deep state, a conspiracy to sort of prevent Donald Trump or anybody else from implementing major changes and then, and sort of a conservative agenda. And then the second thing it did was not only provide who the bad guy was, but then who's the good guy. And in this case, the good guy is not just Donald Trump, it's a unitary executive. So that is it. Obviously, there's a lot of policy that Project 2025 has sort of provided the framework for, but essentially it was a story. And it was a story of who's the bad guy and who's the good guy. And to that extent, that story is playing out exactly according to plan. The only major difference is the timeline. It's just moving along a lot faster. We're basically in sort of like the 5th or 6th month of Project 2025, according to the book, even though we're only in the 2nd month of the administration.
So where does this head next then?
Well, one is that we're barely through the layoffs and the terminations. We've only gotten rid of about 70 or so thousand federal workers. Project 2025 calls for somewhere around 300,000 to about 1 million federal workers to be removed. So where does it go? More layoffs, more terminations. The second thing, and this is the big one, is to sort of set up a collision between the executive branch and the judicial branch. One of the big parts of Project 2025 was to make it very clear that the president and the executive has ultimate authority. And that means that you start with Congress, and Congress has largely abdicated itself to the administration. So that was sort of their first target. But politics basically said, we're not even going to try to fight this out. We're not even going to defend our sort of co-equal status. So now where it goes next is sort of a showdown with the courts.
If the strategy is all laid out, and President Trump, you can argue about what he's done. You can't argue that he hasn't been entirely transparent about it.
Yeah.
How should those opposed to what he's doing, how should they fight back?
I think the thing that's really important here is that we are not fighting a standard political battle. Project 2025 is really unpopular. Nobody actually really likes the policies there, except a very small extreme few. But they don't see how those policies are actually affecting them. There has to be a bigger story here, and that starts with connecting the dots to the administration's actions and the harms that people are experiencing. That's a political issue, but that's as much of a media issue as well. And then broadly, not this. Consensus around not this. And if we are not able to win the hearts and minds, Project 2025, whatever it becomes called, will be the new norm.
And the right and Trump-friendly voices have an advantage here because the other part of your work is looking at their saturation in the media ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
I think the biggest challenge right now that we're grappling with, and there are lots, but they all sort of play out in one arena, and that is an information landscape. And the real battle, from my perspective, is in the information war. And the right just has an enormous advantage there. They've had some advantages along the way. There's always been a little bit of an imbalance. Talk radio and Fox News in the 90s and early 2000s, they had dominance. They had a lot of listeners. But there were other things that counterbalanced them. So they weren't dominant in the entire information landscape. They just spoke to a very consolidated few. That's just not the case anymore. So we just did this really big study that looked on online voices and sort of the largest programs, sort of political and and sort of political adjacent, left adjacent, right adjacent. But when you add it all up, the right and right-leaning and right-adjacent programming accounts for 82% of the major online shows. That's podcasts, that's streaming channels. That's just That's narrative dominance.
And that includes podcasts that aren't overtly political, like sports and comedy podcasts, for instance.
Yeah, that was the part that was the most, to me, surprising and yet disturbing about the study, is that, of the 400 plus shows that we looked at, 100 or so of them were non-political, sports, culture. But when you actually looked at an analysis of the program, I mean, you listened to them, you coded them, we found that 72% of them, 72% of explicitly non-political programming contained not only political content, but right-leaning political content. They just branded it or framed it as something different. And that's where this really becomes key, is that is the lens through which people see the world. And so when all of that programming is sort of tilting the scales in favor of the right, the story that the majority of Americans are getting day to day is right-leaning. And I see no better illustration of that gap than if you look at, in particular, what's happening with young people. Young people are accelerating and moving to the right faster than any other demographic. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they just happen to consume online media more than any other demographic does. That's their primary source, and yet they themselves are moving at a faster and faster clip to the right because that landscape is so heavily dominated and saturated by the right.
It's quite an asymmetry. I mean, is there any way that Democrats could account for that in a way that is authentic?
I mean, that is the key issue here, right? Is that they're playing with a very old playbook. That when they think that the issue here is about messaging and message discipline. Say, well, if we all just go out there and say the same thing at the same time, that will get our message out. That model worked 20 years ago. That doesn't work now. In fact, it feeds into the opposite. They are feeding into the story that's being told about them, which is that they're puppets, that they're inauthentic, that they don't have anything original to say. So what does that mean in practice? Stop worrying about paid media. Ads are not going to be the solution here. Investing in storytellers, the people online that do this work day to day, they're artists in a way. They're storytellers. They're creators. They just need the resources to continue to do what they're doing. That will help balance out the scales. The second is to stop being so afraid. The right has an advantage. That asymmetry doesn't just give them the ability to project a story. It also gives their leaders comfort and confidence. If I know that I could go out there and faceplant and I have a massive ecosystem that is going to be like sandpaper to smooth out all the edges and not only make that faceplant look like the greatest acrobatic feat ever, but somehow turn it into a reward system for me, I have a lot more comfort. I have a lot more confidence.
And that speaks to the broader implications about what it means for our democracy.
That's right. And so unless there's a real concerted effort around that asymmetry, the problem is not only going to not get better, it's only going to get worse, because let's keep in mind that when we talk about all the tech oligarchs and the tech giants rolling back their policies, cozying up to Trump, it's not just that the leaders are doing that. It actually affects the rules of their algorithms, what their systems are doing. That imbalance is only going to speed up because the very systems that support them are actually privileging right-wing lies and right-wing misinformation.
Angelo Carasone, president of Media Matters. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Fatal Invention: How Science, Politics, and Big Business Recreate Race in the 21st Century, by Dorothy Roberts.
The genetic testing company 23andMe has filed for bankruptcy, and its potential sale has raised alarms about what could happen to the DNA data of its millions of users. 23andMe was once a pioneer in the DNA testing kit industry, allowing customers to send in samples to get information about their heredity and genetics. Yet the company faced backlash after hackers leaked the genetic data of millions of users in 2023. More than 15 million people have provided genetic information to the company. Privacy and cybersecurity experts are now concerned about what this could all mean. Ginny Faz is watching this closely for Consumer Reports and joins us now. Thanks for being with us. So what does the sale of 23andMe mean for people's privacy?
Well, there are 15 million people who have used 23andMe to create DNA data. People are interested in understanding their family history and their genetics, but the mere creation of this data means that there is highly sensitive information out there. And because 23andMe is going through bankruptcy and that data could be changing hands, it means that some of the most sensitive data that a consumer can create may be at risk.
Are there any rules or protections about what could happen to the data if a sale does take place?
There are. So in the United States, many states have passed privacy laws. And what these privacy laws allow is the ability to delete your data entirely from a company. And so what that means is if you are a 23andMe customer and you are worried about this sensitive information being out there and possibly changing hands, you can initiate a deletion of your data with 23andMe. And you would do that by going to their website.
And it's also true that the company has already used and even shared some of the data before now. What more do we know about that?
Well, according to 23andMe's privacy policy, in addition to genomic data, which is the A's, C's, T's, and G's that we all learn about in science classes, they also collect a lot of personal information about their customers. So that's things like your home address, your family history, your payment information, those sorts of things. So they're sitting on a pretty robust amount of data for each of their customers. And because the privacy policy gives them dispensation to use that data in lots of different ways, it's hard to know as a customer how exactly that data is being used. You would have to read a multi-page privacy policy with a lot of legalese to understand. And in the case of this bankruptcy, it's possible that that data will change hands and be beholden to different policies. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and that's why we are advising 23andMe customers to delete their data as soon as possible.
How would people do that?
So if you want to delete your data from 23andMe, you should log into your account on their website and go to settings where you can navigate to deleting your data. In some states, that deletion of data will also allow the actual original test sample to be deleted, and there's a way to specify that you want that removed on the 23andMe site as well.
Should consumers of other DNA testing companies be concerned?
Well, something I will say is that when you create DNA data, it is hard to know what will happen to the institution that you've given that data to. So even if you feel really good in the moment about a company having access to this sensitive information, that company could fold, that company could sell, that data could change hands, and it's hard to know where it will end up. Imagine a world where the 23andMe data is somehow acquired by an insurance company. That data could be used to deny you insurance coverage. It could be used to charge you higher premiums for life insurance, for long-term care insurance, for disability insurance. And so if you're going to create DNA data or genetic data, it's important to think through everything that could happen in the future, even if you trust the group that you'd be working with.
That, in fact, was my next question for you. I mean, how might this information be used? Beyond the example you just gave of an insurance company, what are the other possible uses and concerns?
Well, something about this data is, DNA data is unique to every person. And so what that means is there's a lot of clues that can be read as far as your health in this data. So this data may reveal diseases you already have or diseases you could be predisposed to. It can often reveal who you're related to, possibly even where your relatives live, other information about your relatives. It could reveal family secrets. There's a lot that could come from this data falling into the wrong hands. And so that's why if you have created your DNA data with 23andMe especially, we advise you to delete that as soon as possible.
Jenny Foz, Director of Product and R&D at Consumer Reports. Thanks for joining us this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
President Trump's efforts to overhaul the Environmental Protection Agency are being cheered by many in the fossil fuel industry who are critics of what they say is excessive regulation. But many, including scientists and environmentalists, are deeply concerned. Our William Brangham joins us now with more. William?
Jeff, the EPA's new administrator, Lee Zeldin, has been quite explicit, saying he is, quote, driving a dagger through the heart of climate change religion. That has meant enormous changes, ranging from laying off EPA scientists, repealing dozens of rules and regulations, to challenging the very idea that greenhouse gases endanger human health. We are joined now by two former EPA administrators. Christine Todd Whitman headed the agency under President George W. Bush and is a former Republican governor of New Jersey. And Gina McCarthy ran the EPA under President Obama, served as a top climate advisor to President Biden. Thank you both so much for being here. Christine Todd Whitman, to you first. You and Gina McCarthy have both been, Gina McCarthy, to you first. You and Christine Todd Whitman have both been very clear about the dismay that you see at what is happening at the agency that you used to run. When you look at the scale and scope of what is going on, what is it that most stands out to you?
Well, first of all, I thank Christy for all of her work and Bill Riley as well. We put out an op-ed just a few weeks ago on this. Look, they are challenging all of the fundamental tenets of what EPA stands for. First of all, we know that Administrator Leavitt has changed the mission of the agency from protecting health and the environment to American energy dominance. Now, how does that work for an agency that's trying to keep people healthy, that's trying to reduce sources of pollution, and do it in a way that's credible and consistent with the laws of our country? And so it is a sad moment right now because they're trying to dismiss 65% of the human beings that have worked so hard at EPA. And they're really looking at, dismantling all of the scientists, the Office of Research and Development, our Environmental Justice Office. So there is nothing that isn't at risk at EPA. But most importantly, the risk it poses to people in our country is extraordinary, and they have to be aware because we may end up having to protect ourselves if EPA isn't there for us.
Christine Todd Whitman, one of the things that Gina McCarthy just mentioned was the potential dismissal of a series of scientists, including those at the Office for Research and Development. For people who don't know, can you explain who those people are and what their dismissal or departure would mean for the agency?
Well, what it means is you basically stop doing research on new and potential problems for the public, for public health. I mean, these are the people that have done all the research on plastics, showing how microorganisms or micro pieces of the plastic are now getting into the human food chain, and why it's important that we start to deal with that. These are the people that are looking ahead. I mean, when we had the anthrax attacks, there was no standard for what was safe. 1 spore of anthrax, 15 spores of anthrax. That came back to us. It was the EPA that set the standard. I set it at 0. But the scientists followed that up to see what is the safe standard. So these are people who are working every day to protect us and to look for new areas where we might have problems or things that we have seen as problematic in the past that are not so problematic now, that we figured out ways around them, or they're not as bad as we thought they might have been. EPA has a very simple mission, as I'm sure Gina said, which is to protect human health and the environment. And these scientists are focused on doing just that, on making sure that we anticipate where there may be problems and to address them as quickly as we can based on science. Emissions from cars, lead in pipes, it gets into the drinking water. EPA is the one who did the research to show the impact on children's health and development, brain development from lead in pipes, and passed the regulations to reduce that. So it really has, and these scientists are the ones that have a very real impact on people's everyday lives.
Gina McCarthy, President Trump, when he was a candidate, was crystal clear how he stood. He thought that climate change is not something to focus on. He said regulations, including those from the EPA, are hurting consumers. They are hurting the economy. He's clearly got a big constituency in the business community that agrees with him on a lot of those points. And he won the election. Is that not how democracy is supposed to work?
No, that's not how democracy is supposed to work. I mean, the president can have his opinions, but EPA is regulated by Congress. They establish laws. EPA is required under the law to implement the actions that Congress is demanding. And EPA has been doing that. But I think the bigger challenge is let's not lose sight of the fact that, the federal government is really falling apart in so many ways. EPA is definitely one of the targets, but rest assured, we have to rally the troops in states and local communities. And frankly, that's where I'm spending most of my time. actually working with Bloomberg on America is All In, because states also have legal authority. So we have to move forward and protect the interests of people in this country and protect our natural resources. And if the federal government wants to drop that charge, then the rest of the country is going to pick it up. And that's what we're working on now. And it is an enormous coalition that continues to grow. That includes businesses and institutions as well. So this is not just about states and local governments. It's about all of us trying to protect our interests of our children, in which climate change is concerned, protect our ability to live healthy lives and leave our children in a better position than we are in right now.
Christy Whitman, in 2009, this is specifically on this issue of climate change. In 2009, the EPA said carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases are a direct threat to human health. That finding has now allowed EPA to take a lot of action to combat the negative effects of climate change. The current EPA Administrator Zeldin says he wants to look at that finding again and potentially undo it. What would that do to the EPA's ability to address climate change specifically?
Well, it'd pull the rug out from under them. And if we haven't seen from these ever increasing storms, the severity of the storms, the droughts, the floods, the tornadoes, the real economic and human impact of what's going on, and you can't deny climate change. It's happening. I mean, we're not the cause of it, but we certainly exacerbate what's going on, and we need to be smart about figuring out how do we take advantage of new technologies to slow down what's happening, to prepare for the kind of impact that we're seeing around the country, and to do better with everyone. And nobody does innovation better than the United States, and that's where we should be focusing. What can we do to continue to grow our economy, actually to grow it faster? Because you can't have a healthy economy if people don't have clean water to drink and clean air to breathe, and if we don't try to harden ourselves against these ever-increasing storms and disasters that we see around the country.
All right, that is Christine Todd Whitman and Gina McCarthy, both former heads of the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you both so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
The last thing I wanted to say is it's kind of ridiculous, the mask, wearing mask. It makes it to where I don't really want to say hi to people when they're wearing masks. And, you know, I go about my day. I say hi to people every now and then, or a lot sometimes. But I don't want to talk to anybody with a mask. And it makes it to where I don't know, you know, if people are going to do a crime. I don't think, you know, but now everybody has a mask on. But it's really ridiculous. And they weren't wearing a mask when everybody can see the chemtrails, but nobody can see this COVID-19. But, you know, whatever. Okay, thank you.
Americans have become more polarized about vaccines since the COVID-19 pandemic began. That makes it harder to combat public health threats. NPR's Jude Joffe-Block reports.
When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, there was a moment when some people thought it could be a unifying time for the country, like 9/11 had been. But Matt Mata remembers when he felt convinced the pandemic would divide Americans instead. It was late March 2020, almost exactly 5 years ago.
Many states and municipalities had shut down. People were stuck at home, right? Stay-at-home orders. And Trump promised that he was going to reopen the economy, have people back at work, leaving their houses again by Easter Sunday 2020.
President Donald Trump was speaking on Fox News on March 24th, 2020.
So I think Easter Sunday, and you'll have packed churches all over our country. I think it would be a beautiful time.
Mata says those statements were at odds with public health experts at the time. He studies public attitudes towards science at Boston University's School of Public Health.
It's the efforts that President Trump made to portray COVID-19 as not being that serious that led to polarization.
Trump made false claims about the virus and pushed remedies that didn't work. Mata traces a direct line from Trump's comments 5 years ago to public opinion trends that persist to this day.
Why would you vaccinate if the infectious disease threat isn't all that serious? That's when we started to see a split in public opinion, such that Republicans came to hold more negative views toward vaccinating and Democrats came to hold more positive views.
There's a bigger trend. Americans with negative views toward COVID-19 vaccines are increasingly negative about other vaccines, too. 1 in 4 Republican parents are now skipping or delaying some childhood vaccines for their kids, according to a study from KFF, a nonprofit health policy organization. There are, of course, many factors that got us to this moment. University of Washington's Carl Bergstrom, who studies the spread of infectious diseases and misinformation, calls the pandemic
a big opportunity for people pushing anti-vax propaganda to get their foot in the door with new segments of the population, and they did that quite successfully.
One of the most prominent spreaders of that kind of propaganda was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's now Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services. A very real consequence of declining vaccination rates is the growing number of measles cases in Texas and New Mexico.
There's very real concern that this could result in widespread outbreak of measles.
Dan Salmon directs the Institute for Vaccine Safety at Johns Hopkins University.
I really hope that doesn't happen, but the U.S. is quite vulnerable right now.
There's irony to the partisan divide on vaccines. The COVID vaccines were developed quickly thanks to Trump administration initiatives such as Operation Warp Speed. Carl Bergstrom again.
The COVID vaccine saved millions of lives. It was remarkably successful. It was developed in a tiny fraction of the time of any previous vaccine.
A success that would be harder to replicate in our current political environment. Public health experts are worried we aren't learning the right lessons from COVID-19, especially with concerns about a potential bird flu pandemic. Recently, the Trump administration slashed funding for research on vaccine hesitancy. And scientists fear research on the same mRNA technology, which was used in the leading COVID vaccines, could be next. Jude Joffe-Block, NPR News.
My son, that every once in a while makes a cameo on the show, Gray, has about 5 things he will eat in his whole life in his rotation.
Okay.
A vegetable is not in there. He'll eat fruit, but vegetables he will not touch. Grilled cheese, turkey sandwich, corn dogs, every once in a while a chicken tender, and that's about it. Maybe 4 things. Donuts.
And earlier this week, the FDA announced the ban of red dye number 3, the controversial ingredient often found in drinks, candy, and cereal. I'm joined now by Dr. Tara Kester, an integrated pediatrician at Penn State Health Children's Hospital. Thank you so much for joining us, doctor. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we all know red dye. This is something that's been around for a long time. You see it in a lot of foods, as we mentioned, candy, cereal. So talk a little bit about what is the general health concern for the ban of red dye number 3?
Yeah, so red dye number 3 has been around for a really long time. Back in the 80s, there were some studies in rodents that looked at increased risk of thyroid cancer in rats that consumed a large amount of this red dye. And so the concern at that time was, is this translatable to humans? And there's also some provisions from the FDA that if they find this in rats or animals, that we should not include it in products that are approved by the FDA. And so that's the main concern with red dye 3. There are other concerns with other food dyes that we think of more commonly in pediatric patients, but specifically for red dye 3, the concern has been these studies looking at thyroid cancer associated with rats that were done in the 80s.
So we're seeing some of those foods there. Can you talk about what kind of foods we often see this in?
Yeah, so oftentimes the foods that you're going to see red dye number 3 in are going to be your candies. So things like Peeps are still made with red dye 3. You're going to be seeing it in some jelly beans. Oftentimes the cookies that look very bright red, or the icings, even in things like sausages and vegan types of bacon sometimes can have some of this red dye in it, different types of rice. So there's a lot of different foods that actually can contain red dye 3. Now, they've switched a lot of the companies already over to red dye 40. And so a lot of times you're noticing that you're not really finding the red dye 3, now you're finding the red dye 40.
And so talk a little bit about this, because you mentioned this at the top. You often hear that parents avoid giving their kids anything with dye in general, regardless of the number. Why is that? Why is dye so bad if someone is listening today and they want to know why that's the case?
I think we're really coming to this renaissance in kind of healthy eating and parents understanding that there are things in our food that could not be beneficial for our children, could be dangerous to both our children and to the adults that eat them. And so parents are becoming more and more aware of that and hesitant about giving their children anything that has any type of artificial colors or dyes or preservatives in them, just because of the concerns regarding whether it's behavioral changes or hypersensitivity reactions, or just that those foods in general are not as healthy for the children.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this earlier. Red dye has been around my whole life. It's actually been around since 1907. I don't go all the way back to 1907, but it's been around for many of our lives. I mean, why do you think it's taken so long for this to be banned?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's harder to remove something once it's approved than it is to approve it. There's a lot of regulations out there as to how we can do this. And so I'm not quite sure exactly why, when they removed it from cosmetics and from other topical medications, they didn't also remove it from foods. I'm just happy that they've made that decision, and we're kind of working towards making sure that our children are as healthy as possible and they're getting the healthiest foods possible.
Dr. Tara Keck-Kester, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight on what's going on and moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is me, Iris Pike. I'm bad, and I'm so hot for you. For more, hit me up on my fan site.
Sawyer, what is this?
I'm sorry. Squid and I were just messing around.
Squid? You showed him the photo I sent you?
Sorry.
That looks like me doing that stuff. How do they do that?
Squid just had this dumb app.
Everyone sees this. My life is over. I have to go to the principal.
Don't do that.
A new report offers a troubling look at the latest digital threat to young people: deep fake nudes. These are realistic photos and videos that have been altered using AI technology to depict the subjects in sexually explicit situations and then spread online. Stephanie Sy spoke with Melissa Strobel. She's Vice President of Research and Insights at Thorn, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting children online.
Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get to these findings, could you start by just explaining what deep fake nudes are?
Absolutely. So deepfake nudes are synthetic media creations that depict a real person in a sexually suggestive or explicit situation or activity.
What were the main findings in this report? Who was impacted the most by the creation and spread of these deepfakes?
So what we heard from young people in this survey, and we surveyed about 1,200 13 to 20-year-olds, is unfortunately this is becoming all too common of an experience within their landscape and growing up. In particular, 1 in 8 told us that they knew someone who had been particularly targeted, specifically targeted by and impacted by deepfake nudes. On top of that, we heard that 1 in 17 themselves had been targeted by deepfake nude abuse. Now, sometimes that number can feel a little bit small. 1 in 17, that's a small percentage. But when we think about what 17 looks like in our communities, that's the size of our kids' classroom. That's the size of their soccer team. So this is really far too high a number for kids to be experiencing this type of victimization. The other important thing that came through here was about the availability of this technology. And for the kids who told us that they had created deepfake nudes of someone else, the technology is really readily available. It's available through social media, through browsers, and through app stores. But the good news is that most kids realize this is a harmful behavior. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to be having conversations with them and reinforcing those perspectives.
You know, one interesting part of your research that I read were the responses from some of these teens. Even though we call these manipulated images deep fakes, in a way they're very real, right? Especially if you're a victim of deep fakes.
Yeah, very true. For those young people who've experienced deepfake nude abuse, they've shared with us stories of severe anxiety, fear, shame, as well as worries that they won't be believed or that their experiences will be dismissed because of the involvement of AI generative technologies.
What is being done about AI safety right now? What should be being done? Because we're basically talking about minor sexual abuse.
This is absolutely right. At the end of the day, whether AI generative technologies was involved or not, an explicit image of a minor is still child sexual abuse material. And that's a really important starting point. There are responses across the ecosystem taking place. For example, our organization has been working directly with tech companies to make sure that these models are being built as safely as possible. And if they are aware of abusive models, that those are being made unavailable so that they can't be so readily accessed. But there's a lot more work to be done. Right now, we don't have a consistent institutional response that's reinforcing what kids already suspect. And that's an opportunity where we need to lean in and offer more guidance for kids.
In the meantime, what should parents and other caretakers be doing to make sure that their teens are safe?
Having really open and early conversations with the young people in our lives is going to be one of the most important steps we can be doing at home. Make sure that kids understand this is not a joke, it is not funny, and it carries real consequences for the kids that are being targeted. Naming that openly and directly at home is an important first step. But we can be doing more for other adults within our communities, such as within schools. There's a lot of need for there to be clear guidance within schools for their school bodies that this is not permissible behavior. There are student handbooks in place that address things like harassment. This is something that we can lean into and acknowledge this type of emerging risk and have policies in place that make sure that schools are prepared to respond in a victim-centered way.
Melissa Strobel, VP of Thorn's Research and Insights, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But you know, when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
We've long been told to keep an eye on what our children are doing online and who they're talking to. Now the RCMP are warning of a threat unlike anything they've seen before, an online extremist network of predators called 764, luring kids to private servers and chat rooms, grooming them to do unimaginable things, self-harm, hurting pets, even public acts of violence. My co-host at the Fifth Estate, Joanna Rumiliotis, first started investigating this group last year, and since then she's found cases here in Canada, including a family who says their case wasn't taken seriously by the RCMP. And a warning, this story contains details of sexual assault, suicide, and graphic content. Joanna joins me in studio now. Good morning.
Good morning.
How would you describe 764, and how did you find out about it?
Well, we first heard about it last year when a father reached out to the Fifth Estate. He had found images of his daughter, very, very disturbing images of self-harm, and he was looking for help. At the time, it was a pretty obscure group, and as we started digging into it, we started to speak to experts who were tracking it. We also found a victim and police in Virginia who helped us paint a very, very disturbing picture of the group. It's unlike, as you mentioned, Mark, anything experts and police have ever seen. And these are people who are very familiar with the darkest, most depraved corners of the internet. And they were shocked. Police describe it as a neo-Nazi, satanic network of extremists. That's a mouthful, but imagine how many dark elements are involved here. And the heartbreaking thing is they deliberately target kids who are vulnerable. And they force them to do things like cut themselves, hurt their pets, and hurt others. Now, at the time when we looked into it last year, we knew it was a global threat. We tried to get to the RCMP. They only responded with an email at the time saying they were aware of the group and they were keeping track of its potential threat. But we knew there was more to the story, and we wanted to find out what the story was in Canada. Were there perpetrators? Were there victims? And then we found out there were.
You found a young girl named Trinity. How did you find her? Tell us more about her and her story.
You know, Maria and Trinity spoke to the Fifth Estate for the first time publicly. It took some digging to connect with them, but once we did, their story was so horrifying, and the fact that they were willing to share it was incredible on their part. They live in Red Deer, Alberta. Trinity was a young teenager when she stumbled into a 764 chat room, and within weeks, she said, she was groomed and then exploited by several members. Now we know 764 goes after vulnerable kids, and Trinity told us she was easy prey. She had been sexually assaulted for years as a child, and she said it left her with a distorted sense of what male affection and attention look like. And initially, you know, part of the grooming process is what they call love bombing. You know, they were very complimentary and attentive, and she felt adored. But as the exploitation deepened, they started making demands that were very dark, including forcing her to self-harm, in some cases carve their usernames into her skin. This is a trademark of 764. And her worst tormentor demanded she kill her pets and even her mother to prove her devotion. It's important to hear Trinity's voice. So here she is.
I was 14 when I was groomed by members of 764, and I was exploited for 3 years. It just became so painful. I didn't feel real. I didn't feel like a human being. We've tried to tell this story, and nobody's listened. Nobody believes it. It's too obscure. It's too obscene.
And Trinity's mom, Maria, joins us now from Alberta. We're not using the family name to protect their identity. Maria, this is a difficult story for anyone, but what's it like hearing that clip of your daughter?
You know, it definitely feels surreal, watching, you know, clips and seeing ourselves telling the story hits different than it does when you tell somebody the story. It hits my heart differently to hear the sadness in her voice. It's been a difficult time.
Yeah, tell us about that journey, Maria. You started noticing changes in Trinity, so you went through her phone, which is a natural place to go for a parent. What did you find?
I had found extremely disturbing photos of herself in compromising positions. I found a lot of pictures of animals being hurt. Videos of animals being hurt, along with videos and photos of her self-harming. I remember those pictures. I remember looking at that phone and the sheer devastation. It's one of those things that just doesn't go away. It's burnt in my mind forever.
And you did what I think most parents would do, which is you took away her phone and tried to keep her off the internet, but then she became a runaway. When you called the police, what did they do for you?
So I had originally called the police because I wasn't really quite sure exactly to the extent of what this group was. Yep. I knew this group was there. I just wasn't really sure. So when she started to run away, my biggest fear was that she was going to meet up with these people and she was going to be trafficked or that she was going to be killed. So when I was calling the police as she was a runaway, it was always, this is a child who has mental health issues. This is a child who is suicidal. This is a child with the potential of being trafficked or put into prostitution. And I would say constantly, if I lose her, I'll never find her. I know that I'll never find her. And they would say that they would keep an eye out for her, but legally they couldn't bring her home to me because she would just come out the door anyway. So they could bring her home, but she was going to leave anyway. So it was lack of help. It was also the age that she was in. It made it difficult for the police to kind of help. The child has more rights than I had at the time.
And when she hit a breaking point in July 2021, when members of 764 encouraged her to take her own life, what happened when you went to the hospital?
When we went to the hospital, sadly, I would like to say that it was our first time, but it was not. So by this time, because of the level of self-harm, I came in differently. I had come in extremely distressed. Every other time I had tried to hold it together as her mom when she tried to take her life and be stoic and, you know, sit there and try to tell the hospital kind of what was going on with her mental health and what had happened to her as a child. This time I came in and I was walking the hallways begging and pleading, you can't let her out of here. I can't keep her alive. If you let her out, she will die. I can't keep her alive. And I remember this little nurse came and hugged me. And she said, we're going to do everything we can, okay? And I said, well, you told me that you would before, and you haven't. The police came. They took pictures of her body. She was taken to the safe house. Sadly, I felt that she was not held for long enough. She wasn't held for long enough because when she came out, this continued and the violence got progressively worse.
At the hospital, and when the staff calls the police and they meet with Trinity, was that the first time that Trinity had told police about 764?
Yes.
And what was their reaction when they heard about it?
When Trinity had first told them about 764, I think they didn't believe us, to be completely honest. I think that they thought, again, that this is a mentally ill child who is harming herself and wants to die. They were kind. They treated her kindly, but it wasn't by lack of judgment to me as a mother. They were looking at me like I was the problem, I was the failure, and that my daughter must be lying.
And I can hear it in your voice. What it is, it's a plea for help from anyone who can help. And at one point, you took the phones to the police, all the electronics, laptops, and saying that this is evidence. You need help. And they were later returning them, saying that they couldn't get the right passwords to get in. What did you make of that?
Well, still to this day, I have a hard time believing that. This is what they do for a living. If a 764 individual can break into my Wi-Fi and find out my address and where I live and hack me and find out my family and all of these things, and these are just a Joe Schmo in their 20s or even younger or older, you cannot tell me that the police did not have access to that cell phone and did not find proof and evidence on what was going on to my daughter.
So you believe that they just weren't taking this seriously?
I think they weren't taking it serious because they're looking at my daughter as somebody who is mentally ill and self-harms. They're not seeing the full picture.
And Joanna, the key evidence was really what was on those electronic devices. And the RCMP was having a hard time unlocking those devices to find the evidence. You reached out to the RCMP in Red Deer to ask about those devices. What did they tell you about?
They told us pretty much what they told Maria as well, that the passwords provided were incorrect. And to Maria's point, you hear it in the doc, these groups made kids change their passwords constantly to avoid detection, so they couldn't remember them. Fair enough. And these are experts going into devices, so the assumption is that they could break in anyway. They did tell us, though, that they got into the laptop and that despite using other investigational techniques, they couldn't access one of the phones, and that if they kept trying, it could take years. We asked if they found any evidence on the devices that they were able to access, and they wouldn't share any information because they said Trinity was a youth at the time. And we did get an interview with the RCMP for this story. It was the head of the RCMP's counterterrorism unit in Edmonton, who did not want to get into specifics of any case, but he acknowledged that in 2021, police officers were probably not as aware of 764 as they are now, because he acknowledged that police are only really catching up with the threat in the last couple of years.
Do police here in Canada or around the world, do they actually know what they're up against?
They seem to know more now. When we reached out last year, the RCMP told us they were aware and watching. Now, the RCMP's counterterrorism unit is leading a number of investigations in Canada related to 764. And police here and around the world rely on one of the world experts on 764. There's not many of them because this is a pretty emerging threat, but he's right here in Canada. His name is Marc-Andre Argentino. He studies extremism, works with Public Safety Canada, and says tracking 764 here is now a top priority. And he helped us understand the complexities behind this group and how the danger is escalating.
There's no activism behind their decision. They're not even worried about, the disappearance of the white race. This is actually a interracial community. They just want to be the most violent, the most misanthropic type of individual they can be.
Joanna, what do we know about these members of 764? I as I was watching this, young men, I was just curious to know more about what has drawn them into this terrible sadistic network.
We were able to speak to a member who exploited the young girl in our first piece. And it's really hard to kind of feel a connection to this person, this particular person. He seemed almost detached from his own story.
Yeah, you have a conversation he's in prison. You have a telephone conversation with him.
Yeah. And he talks about how, he was going after social media notoriety. He wanted to be popular online, and he was the founder or one of the founders of one of the initial groups in the 764 network, because there's a bunch of them. And he talked about how he was, looking for kicks, if you will, how he never really thought about the impact it would have on the young people he was exploiting, that he has empathy issues and that he's working on that while in prison. He also talked about, and this was an early precursor to what Argentina was talking about and the terror threat, he talked about that there was this fascination among members about mass acts of violence, especially ones that were motivated by racism. So a pretty dark conversation, and not one that really leaves you feeling that this person has a whole lot of insight as to the harm he already caused. But in a bigger picture scale, there are many members who are very young, 14, 15, some of them are 11 years old. And there's a feeling that these kids cannot be simply thrown away. In the U.S., many of them are serving long sentences. The founder of the group, Bradley Cadenhead, was only 15 when he started this group, and he named it after his zip code in Texas. He's serving an 80-year sentence in the U.S. But in Canada, there seems to be a bit more of a focus on rehabilitation. So we know 2 cases of 764 members in Canada who are being helped by a group that tries to reintegrate extremists into society. And when we spoke to them out there in Edmonton, they talked about how, in their experience working with youth, often predators have their own history of abuse, and then they learn to detach from the violence they inflict on others, and that with intervention, with the right amount and the right kind, they can develop empathy and compassion. But they told us as well, they've never seen anything like this, and they're kind of grappling as to how to best approach this, because it is a tough one.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Racial comments or actions are unacceptable. The fact that the kids that are standing up to this are also being bullied and harassed just doesn't sit well with us.
A group of East Aurorans, dozens strong, all marching in unison over what the East Aurora School District called several incidents of racial discrimination within its schools in a letter sent to all district parents.
We want to be here to show that the community and parents support the school and East Aurora.
And make sure that visibly we're not okay with the racist-related incident in the school.
These parents tell me those incidents were caused by students at the middle school. And members of this group, with many signs in hand, say they hope to encourage those impacted by that discrimination.
Letting them know that there's a whole community out here that loves and cares for them and don't want to see them having a hard time.
We love these kids and we're behind them 100%, and we want to make sure that they have a safe place to be and that they feel safe.
I reached out to Superintendent Brian Russ to learn more about just what happened. He didn't return my calls. But the district's letter to parents says all individuals involved are being held accountable, including disciplinary actions, and to ensure that those responsible understand the gravity of their actions and the harm caused to their peers and the school community.
What's the message you're trying to get across to the kids who are the culprits of this and are being worked with the school? I mean, do you fear that this might, almost threaten them in a way, that this many people are coming out against their actions?
Absolutely not. This is not against any of the kids. We want to support all of them. We want to help them heal. We want to help them learn. We want to make sure those kids are cared, supported, but they know there's consequences to their actions, and their actions hurt people, so we want them to learn, heal, and grow from this.
That letter from the school also mentions several different educational initiatives will be coming over the coming weeks to, quote, begin the healing process. We're a voice for East Aurora, Derek Hyde, 7 News.
The B, the R, the O, the O, the K, the L, the Y, the N. It's Brooklyn. It's Brooklyn. It is the B, the R, the O, the O, the K, the L, the Y, the N. It's Brooklyn.
The NYPD investigating her son's attack as a hate crime tonight.
All right, the vicious attack happening at the Coney Island Stillwell Ave station in Brooklyn. And that's where we find Fox 5's Duarte Geraldino tonight. Duarte.
Steve, it happened right here on Monday around 8 o'clock. That's when that teen was on his way to school, and police say he was attacked. His mother frames it differently. She says her boy was beaten by a gang of white teenagers, and tonight she's speaking out.
And he didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve that. And these thugs are terrorizing black children in this neighborhood. The videos are all circulating. I want something done.
Now, the video she was speaking about is widely being shared online, and it shows several teens who appear to be white beating the 16-year-old black person. The NYPD's hate crime task force is now on the case, but this is more than just a beating. According to police, the group surrounded him and used racial slurs, hit him, and even took one of his shoes. His mom says this wasn't just about hurting him, it was about humiliating him.
A video circulated the next day of my son being brutally attacked. Not once, but twice. In this train station. And I have questions. I want to know why. Why was my son beat twice? They threw a banana at him. It hit him in his face. He asked why. They beat him. They have pictures. They posted pictures of him on the floor. He got up. They chased him, and they beat him again at another section of this train station. And it's wrong.
And you're looking at live images of the train station right now. It is normally a very busy station. 2 teens were arrested and now face several charges, including robbery and gang assault. And because they're minors, police have not released their names or their ethnic backgrounds. And that's important because, again, this is a hate crime investigation. And the mom is saying this isn't about just her son. It's part of a larger problem. This same subway station has seen repeated violence. A few months ago, a woman was set on fire here. Just this week, another 16-year-old boy was stabbed in the leg. And tonight, this subway station is at the center of a hate crimes investigation involving a black teen who was allegedly beaten by a gang of white teens. Steve, Natasha?
All right, Duarte, thank you.
Well, I don't want to be the one to break your heart, but Sunshine's from California.
Yeah, a California dreamboat.
No. Sunshine is from California. Yeah, he's a Californian.
An investigation has revealed stark differences in how white and black people were sentenced in robbery murders under a former San Diego district attorney. Reporter Katie Heisen says nearly all of the black defendants are serving life without parole.
When Layla Aziz moved back to San Diego, she wondered where the people she grew up with went.
So it became super personal.
She discovered a few were convicted of murder during a robbery, something called felony murder special circumstances. Even if they didn't commit the murder, if they were part of the robbery, it was life without parole, a sentence to die in prison.
How do you get a death sentence if you didn't kill anyone?
California laws recently changed. People can now appeal for resentencing if they weren't the actual killer, or if they can prove racial bias in their case. So Aziz filed a public records request for all robbery murder cases with defendants between 18 and 25 years old at the time of the crime. She chose that because before 25, the decision-making part of the brain hasn't fully developed. All under Paul Pfingst, San Diego's district attorney from 1995 to 2003. Similar cases, apples to apples. She found many white defendants who could have been charged with special circumstances never were, or were given plea deals for lesser charges. Some cases were missing.
And that's when we realized you're not going to get the data just from the DA. We're going to have to dig.
By we, she means the nonprofit she runs, Pillars of the Community. They analyzed mass amounts of data, filed more records requests, visited courts, combed through archives. KPBS did the same. A clear pattern emerged. 13 out of 15 white defendants in robbery murder cases, killers and non-killers, were given the chance at parole, including one convicted of brutally murdering a Latino man. A witness said he bragged about earning his bolts, a common white supremacist tattoo. 11 out of 12 black defendants, killers and non-killers, were given life without parole.
When you're looking at people, not even numbers anymore, I know all of their names by heart, and you see them treated differently by the same exact system, you're like, separate but equal? Plessy versus Ferguson, Jim Crow, it all feels the same.
The data show it wasn't one problem judge, one overeager attorney, or even prior convictions. It was a racial pattern. Pillars decided to hold what they call a people's tribunal.
To charge the district attorney the way they charge us, to subpoena the district attorney the way they subpoena us.
On a late January night, they put the current district attorney on mock trial. It was standing room only. Enlarged mugshots bordered the room.
Every single person has the same exact crime.
Aziz pointed to a black man's mugshot.
That's a non-killer. Death or parole? Death.
Then to a white man's mugshot.
Guy next to him, non-killer. Death or parole? 7 years, didn't even have to do that.
A lone representative from the DA addressed the room, Frank Jackson.
How did this happen? The answer to your question is, I don't know that answer, so I'm not going to make it up. I think most of these will look like the 1998s and 2000s.
A district attorney spokesperson told KPBS the current office takes equal justice seriously. Quote, to suggest otherwise is reckless. They would not respond to any of KPBS's questions. Aziz won't let them off the hook because the district attorney has the power now to re-sentence these cases from life without parole to life with parole.
But she has chosen not to do it. So you can't fight to uphold Paul Finks's legacy of foundational racism and then say it was before your time.
Finks didn't respond to KPBS. At the People's Tribunal, they called witnesses, including Linda Whitley. Her son's mugshot was in the room. She asked Aziz to hold up what she sees as proof he's changed. College degrees he earned in prison, books he wrote. His court process was hard for her.
It was terrible because I didn't understand a lot of stuff they were saying.
Whitley was never taught to read. She doesn't fully understand the word parole. She just knows some people get to come home, and her son can't.
I know he can show the world now. He could be a better person now.
You have a prepaid call from
Marquel Smith,
an incarcerated individual at the California State Prison, Los Angeles County.
Even though I have a life without the possibility plus 206-year sentence, I know that the good Lord has a plan for me in the near future.
Marquel Smith didn't always talk this way.
For years, I was just bumping my head in and out of the hole, catching shoes, being involved with violence. And the way prison was back then, you wouldn't hear about nobody going home. If you had life, you had life. It's all about survival and doing what you do to, maintain, your status. But at the same time, that comes from your adverse childhood experiences.
Adverse childhood experiences are among many challenges Smith has lived, but only recently learned language for. He says education and faith changed his thinking. A priest used to visit him in solitary confinement. He started attending the prison's church services and college classes.
Now I want to, be an engine of putting a stop to the self-destruction that goes on in the same type of communities in which I come from.
He wrote 2 books, including one to steer youth away from crime. He quit cursing and smoking weed. He mentors other incarcerated people. He says he hasn't been written up for bad behavior since 2016.
I want others to understand that there's a better way, and love is the key.
Despite these changes, Smith can't go before the parole board to let them decide if he deserves it. His sentence doesn't let him. He was convicted of killing the 19-year-old clerk during a convenience store robbery. He denies that. Whether Marquel Smith is innocent or guilty doesn't change the racial differences in the sentencing of cases like his. And Smith thinks there was racial bias in his trial, too.
The judge was calling me and my co-defendant dudes, and when the detective was allowed to talk about, ghetto gang hits in my case, and my case was not even a gang case. You know what I'm saying? And why are you talking about the ghetto, in front of a jury? That had to be racist. You know what I mean? I knew that long ago, but I didn't know how to incorporate it into my argument.
He has an appeal hearing in May. If that's denied, he might appeal again under California's Racial Justice Act, or RJA. It would allow for resentencing if he could prove racial bias in his case. When the RJA was passed in 2020, Colleen Chen got to work.
It was definitely a lot of pain to do it.
She co-directs the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. She wanted to provide evidence for the unequal treatment Black people have voiced for decades.
Lived experience has been there the whole time, but the ability to tell a more broad story based on data has been missing.
She built a database to compare racial outcomes in the California justice system. She found a pattern she calls striking.
What you might hear is, in general, we see that Black people are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. But when you actually go at the granular level and look specifically at, well, are they arrested more? Are they convicted more? At every county and every single charge, we saw that there was disparity. It's really hard to explain that as existing without the presence of bias.
Chen says bias doesn't mean the judge or the attorney or arresting officers are explicitly racist, but that unconscious attitudes add up at every step of the judicial process. Marquel Smith wants to earn a law degree and change that. A new state bill introduced this month could give him the opportunity. SB 672. It would allow all people convicted for crimes committed between the ages of 18 and 25, when brains aren't fully developed yet, to go before the parole board after 25 years. I asked Smith, if he were granted parole, what he would do first.
Wow. I want to spend some time with my mother. I was locked up, like I said, at 17. I got out at 21, came back at 22. Here it is, I'll be 50 this year. So I haven't had a chance to spend no time with my mother.
She wants the same.
I just want to see my baby come home.
This is what Smith wants people to know.
People do change, you know what I'm saying? If people see that people can change, you know what I'm saying, that should mean something.
The California legislature has 6 months to pass SB 672. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Gus T, Renegade, Context of White Supremacy. Say, colored boy, don't change your spots. Context of White Supremacy. Worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T, Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, March 29, 2025, so I have been told. I had to pause for a moment and say, oh, wow. They went and talked to, was it Colleen Cheen, C-H-I-E-N, at the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology, the BCLT, affectionately known. I said, dang. I didn't even know about that. I was just there. I probably walked right past there, over, getting my Jonestown material and Patrice Lumumba material, all the rest of the goodies down in California. And look at that, at the BCLT, Privacy and Cybersecurity Law Center. Sound like you need that if you use 23andMe. Make sure they don't be playing, hanky-panky with my data. Anyway, again, that is the UC Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. Oh, wait a minute. Located in the world's most important innovation hub, the BCLT has benefited from its deep ties to the San Francisco Bay and Silicon Valley communities. No wonder we have been the #1 nationally ranked IP program for over 20 years. I bet you William Shockley hung out here once or twice, I bet. Anyway, not for spectators, our weekly broadcast. Dial in if you have thoughts, observations. We have attempted parents. Let us know. For sure, if we have attempted parents, a few of the segments from this week, we have attempted parents classified as black, non-white. Anyway, the number 605-313-5164. the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We'll have to see, have to confirm and such, but we might be here tomorrow, Sunday, normal time, and then again on Tuesday. Just have to double check and confirm. White guests only, especially for Tuesday, because that is April Coon Day, so you don't make a fool out of old Gus T. So we'll confirm and make sure that we are right as rain for both days. Again, that would be Sunday and Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the only time we broadcast, unless it's someone from someplace far, far away. Now, let's see. Before get to tidbits from the news reports, very important suggestions, counter-racist questions or ideas, observations. I was able to speak with Miss Sheena Scarborough yesterday. She is the mother of Sade Robinson, black female, who was murdered, dismembered, beheaded last year, literally about this time last year. I spoke with her mother again on Friday. Again, I was reluctant, even I'd say uninterested in pursuing Miss Scarborough, even though we've kept up with this case for a year and been talking about this case and how important this is and how it, for the most part, has not really been talked about at all. CNN talked about this. I'll have to double check, but I don't know if they've done recent reports, meaning 2025. Nancy Grace from O.J. Simpson and Tiger Woods. She used to hate Tiger Woods, but she has interviewed Miss Scarborough, I think 4 times at least, and then the local Milwaukee News has covered this case. But beyond that, New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, nothing. And importantly, the Chicago Tribune has not talked about this case since last June. That's important because I told you Sade Robinson, she was dismembered, 19-year-old black female, dismembered by a white man. Her body parts were spread in 2 different states. They found her remains in Wisconsin and Illinois. That's why it's important that the Chicago Tribune, they stopped talking about this last year. They found some of those remains in the Illinois state line. They did acknowledge that, and that was that. Moving on, we got other things to talk about up here in Chicagoland. Anywho, I have been so impressed with Miss Scarborough. She's just been so steadfast. As I said, the first time that I spoke with her last month, she answered every question. She was so composed and, serious about making sure she gets justice for her daughter and doing everything that she can. And trial even having been delayed. I think this trial was supposed to have taken place like the end of last year, like December-ish, somewhere in there, but they had delays and just all the rest of it. So it has been a lot, but she's just been, and I was so impressed last time. I told you I will forever have her in mind. We talk to these cowardly white people and they're pussyfooting and hemming and hawing and can't even answer a question. She knocked down every question. Parent who had my child murdered and beheaded, knocked them all. There wasn't no knocked them all down. I talked with her when I spoke with her Friday. I'm saying, I'm thinking about coming out there to cover the trial, like seriously, and looking at details. And you think this is going to be delayed again? She's like, no, I don't think so. And they delayed it before. Not in charge, but I mean, it shouldn't have been delayed in December. So, Obviously, she is not in not in the camp of delay. Like, she's ready to roll right now. In fact, that's she said, getting ready for the trial. Getting ready for the trial. And I was telling her I wanted to come down to cover all of this, and she said she had told some of her attempted relatives, like, oh, wow, we got guy does this program, wants to come out to cover the trial. He's been talking about Sade Robinson case for a year and all that, and has this book club apparently where they've talked about Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, yeah, we need to take a listen to that. Now, part of me, I said, yikes. Because we had talked about the book club before with Miss Sade Robinson's mother, Miss Scarborough, and certainly she warmly invited. Love to have her. But when this conversation first came up, we were talking about Dr. Maya Angelou, Mad Dog 2020. I was really, really hopeful that that would not be the book club that she would tune into to hear Mad Dog and, I'm going to get me some, like, none of that. Fast forward all that. Or to find out that they, like, love Phenomenal Woman and memorize that poem and have portraits to Maya Angelou. Like, that would be my type of a thing. Anyway, so I said yikes on the one. But I said, oh, they did hit the fast forward. She said Dahmer. She didn't say Maya Angelou. Whew. And I said, now Dahmer, I didn't have an immediate yikes about Miss Scarborough, Sade Robinson's family. If that's going to be their first introduction to the cows, us reading Lionel Dahmer's memoir. Whew. Now, I would have to go back to make sure my immediate recollection is that I don't think I acted a fool I think I might have behaved a little bit. We had just read Columbine, and that's why we were reading that even. So I don't think we acted too much a fool, and we did get to talk about racism. And the one thing that I did think was, if they listen to that, that means that they will hear Neely Fuller Jr. saying, Dahmer, that is the essence of white supremacy. I didn't say yikes about them saying we might listen to that Dahmer thing. I told them maybe we need to. Lionel Dahmer. I'm so glad we read that. I'm so glad. That's why I picked the book club. I don't care what you want to read. Like, ever. Imagine we had switched that out to read some garbage, some fiction. People saying we read novels and nonsense. I picked the books. It's the Catherine Massey Book Club, Buffalo. 22 caliber. I pick the books. Anyway, Lionel Dahmer in the archives. Fuller said that in Milwaukee when she said, why did you pay attention to this case? You're so far away. And it is. You're so far away. It's thousands of miles. Fuller said, Dahmerland, Milwaukee, that is what it means to be white. That's why buried Sade Robinson with no head. Anyway, with all that, Miss Scarborough, when she spoke to me, she said, you didn't get the court documents? Now, the trial is coming up, so everything is coming out in the trial. I can't talk about everything, can't go on everything, can't share everything because the trial is coming up, can't mess that up. But some of the public court records, I could send you those, like the arrest report, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's public. You could, Whew. So impressed. But man, please. Self-care, Miss Scarborough. Just take excellent care of yourself, get lots of rest, and and just take care of yourself. I can make a public records request at the courthouse, which I did. And I said, we put the white people at the courthouse to work. Put your feet up, just sleep, self-care. Self-care. I will get it from the courthouse. And even if they take weeks, I'll get it, well in advance of the trial that's at the end of May. So but she was right there. stranger, other side of the country. She was right there. Court documents, check it out. You can be informed. You can see what this, what shall I say, race soldier did to her child, 19-year-old child. Anyway, I cannot exactly see. I don't never get no trips where it's excited. Under no circumstances would I be excited about going to Wisconsin. This is the second time I'll be going to Wisconsin for counter-racist purposes. No Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. and the Yak Club this time, I hope. Cross my fingers. And then Buffalo in the weather. That's another one. I would never cheer about going to Buffalo. I'm just thankful I'm not going to be there in the winter time so that I don't have to worry about a blizzard and dying in a snowstorm. And then to go for a butchering in Milwaukee, and then nearly a dozen black people killed at a grocery store in Buffalo. Like, it's nothing like, yeah, this is self-care for Gus T. And I especially am having a brace for that Wisconsin trial. I'm like, oh, man, they might have, like, the autopsy photos. And, oh, this is going to be like, oh, man. Self-care for all, but everyday coverage, all that notwithstanding, I do think very important. If the cows had been on during Dahmer, oh my God, if I had heard Fuller or Welsing at that time, yes, we would have been front row, Dahmer land, go talk to those black people and all the rest of it, and boom, boom, boom. Yes, we would have been there front row. What does it mean to be white? Anyway, have time. Hopefully I can research, be right there, and maybe talk to some of the folks from Dahmer time and all that. Ask her, Miss Scarborough, were you here when all this happened? And I've been too cowardly to bring that up, even though we have talked about Dahmer. Were you here when all that happened? And same question that I've been having the whole year. Did you talk with Sade Robinson? Did y'all talk about Dahmer or, research it? Anyway, Milwaukee, Buffalo, that is the plan. Hopefully our best year of counter-racist work ever should be, because, that is important time to be at your best to cover two, I think, historic trials. Does Peyton Gendron get the death penalty? And then what happened in Milwaukee? Great time to invest. Hit the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button, top right corner. Beneath the PayPal button, you'll see the links for Cash App, PayPal, and Venmo. The Cash App address, cash.app/the $, the cows, cash.app/$ the cows. Enormous gratitude to all the folks who have kept us on the air for 16 years, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. You can also hit the wish list, Amazon.com, or not Amazon.com, I guess that is it, but still, at Amazon, listed under Gus T. Renegade. It is linked at my blog. Much obliged to all the listeners who have nabbed an item or 12 over all of our years of broadcasting. Again, hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy. Certainly, great year. Share the broadcast. Archives available, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify Music, Amazon, Podbean, Podchaser. Could go on. Lots and lots of ways to access the archives, share the content. Neely Fuller Jr.'s programs. I've been sharing his many, many visits to the cows. Somebody asked me that this week. They said, is it possible that you can give me the specific links to every time Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing were a guest on the program? And I wanted to just write them back and say, now you do realize you're asking me to give you like 60 specific links. And then my next question was going to be, now, do you think That is a reasonable request, because I'm going back in my memory banks. I have never asked someone, is it possible that you can give me 60 specific links, or even half that, 30? Never. At any rate, I did send them the playlist, Whoopi, and in fact, you can locate Podchaser. I just said that one. You can go to Podchaser. The cows right there. You can download that, get it on your phone, computer, what have you. Once you go, the cows archives at Podchaser specifically, they have a search engine that works extremely well. All you have to do, you'll see the little icon. It'll be in the right where it says search episodes. It looks like the tuner on like stereo, right? If you click that, it'll open up the little search window, and you can just type in Fuller, Welsing, Dahmer, all of the episodes where Neely Fuller Jr. hung out and or was mentioned will pop up. Same thing if you put in Dahmer, book club, all that will pop up. Sometimes that might even be the better way to do it, because if you get all the episodes, presumably where Fuller was a guest, right, there are times where Fuller was not a guest per se, but he did make a cameo appearance, like even sometimes a significant, like substantial cameo appearance, where that is noted in the description, but he wasn't the guest, so it's not going to pop up where, ooh, Fuller's 20th visit to, they won't pop up that way. Same for Dr. Welsing. Podchaser, the cows, they do have a search engine, and I've showed people how to do that. I don't think it's that difficult, but I realize some people will still learning. Let's see. Oh, and rewind for Miss Scarborough. You can go to her foundation, Sade's Voice Foundation.com. Sade's Voice Foundation.com, and support, keep track. Since it's coming up on a year since Sade was murdered, they're doing a lot, local news. They're doing a lot of stories. I think Miss Scarborough is going to be on the news this week. I think Sade Robinson's father will be on the news doing some of the interviews. I think she said they're supposed to have like a 30-minute segment talking about this case coming up in the next few days. So I will share links. Share with other folks, especially if you know people who have teenage children. I would think teenage daughters especially. Share. This would be a case to discuss for lots of reasons. Let's see. When I spoke with Miss Scarborough, she mentioned Emily Pike again. And she said, I am keeping up with this case because this is a non-white teenager, I think she was 14, in Arizona, not Wisconsin, who was killed, dismembered. And she said, I'm keeping up with this case, obvious reasons, reminds me of my daughter, Sade. And she said, it makes patterns, in terms of this happening on a wide-scale basis, and particularly to non-white females. Wow, that is important. That I reminded, we talked about Roger Galewski in Kansas, and then Timothy Hazlitt Jr., because his court case is coming up later this year. That's also in Kansas, or I think that's in Missouri. I think that might be across the border in Missouri, but it's right there, right next door to Kansas, where Timothy Hazlitt Jr., where he had been, same thing, targeting, sexually assaulting, even holding in captive black females, and they think even maybe killing black females. So, yes, pattern, definitely something to be mindful about what's happening. In fact, I said to Miss Robinson, I have been paying so much attention to the Wisconsin local news. I said, dang, did you see the case? It was 2 black females in Racine that went missing. And she said, no, where was it? Was in WISN just 2 days ago. It was right there. They said they had these 2 black females. How far is Racine from Milwaukee? He said, oh, dang, that's like just 30 minutes away. It's like, wow, that is. They said they haven't seen them for 2 years. 2 different black females. Anyway, patterns, paying attention. That's not pay attention to the news. Not talking about Ms. Scarborough, just us in general. Pay attention to the news. Very important. But I think it was said last week that or suggested that individuals classified as black, I think we should just focus on ourselves in terms of what's happening to us, how we are being victimized, things that we need to do, problems that we need to solve. Certainly, this broadcast, I do not subscribe to anything that suggests individuals classified as black, we are all in this together, we just need to focus on ourselves. I am not about that at all. People classified as black do not even, many individuals classified as black that talk about racism do not support my work at all. So I certainly would not subscribe to anything like that. Many of the very people that we, non-white people, and I would even say black people, certainly black people that say we are about counter-racism, many of the very people that we revere, they did not endorse that way of thinking. Dr. Welsing did not go to Nazi Germany to see about no black people there, unless I have been greatly misinformed. She went to study Nazi Germany, white supremacy, racism. Neely Fuller Jr. is the only person I have heard discuss the Bhopal, India 1984 gas leak as white supremacy racism. I'd never heard that event until him, and then they mentioned it once we got to, what is that, the 40-year so-called anniversary from that event happening. It's like, oh my God. And I think they might have even said environmental racism. Fuller had been talking about that a long time ago. I do not see anything in error or inaccurate about that. Study everything. I think that's what Fuller said. Study a little bit about everything. Presumably that would include everyone, so that we can figure out this problem. Certainly, en route to becoming universal woman, universal man, I do not think we need to be that narrow-minded. The only things in the universe I study, just going to focus on us black people. In terms of people, I don't focus on any other people, just going to focus on black people. That does not make sense at all. If we're talking about giving resources, that's something else. That's not what we were talking about. We were just talking about studying, being aware of things that are happening in the world. I say study everything. Everything. And for real, I am suspicious about any time whereas we should narrow in terms of what we pay attention to, focus on. People classified as black, even the ones with 8 black great-grandparents born in Mississippi or Georgia, we do not pay attention to a whole lot anyway. That's a major foundation of the compensatory call-in anyway. That's why we have that big audio news segment at the beginning, because we don't pay attention to the news. We don't even pay attention to the news as it relates to other black people. Now this is, hey, what have we been doing for 16 years? So am I talking to black people that are experts about Jonestown? Am I talking to black people that are experts about Hurricane Katrina? Okay, I'm cheating. I'm going old style. How about, how informed are you all about Sade Robinson? Especially if retract what you heard from the cows. So other sources. How informed are you about Sade Robinson? How informed are the black people that you are around, that you know, your attempted family, so-called friends, neighbors, co-workers? How informed are they about Sade Robinson? Do they mention this case? Are they looking forward to the trial? Timothy Hazlitt Jr., Roger Golubsky, the California wildfires. They got the recovery conference today. L.A. Sentinel, black newspaper in L.A., long time in publication. Malcolm X talked about them over 60 years ago. Wildfire recovery conference, same thing I've been saying for 2 months now. Not one California Cows listener has sent me one report about the impact of those wildfires on black people. You could have picked that up a bunch of different. LA Sentinel, what I just said, even if we just checked black news sources, the LA Sentinel has covered this repeatedly for 3 months. 60 Minutes, LA Times, PBS, nothing. So, to a group of people, victims of white supremacy for sure, and victims that white people deliberately withhold constructive information about all kinds of things, I would not say we should just study what's happening to us. Study everything. We're trying to be a universal man, a universal woman. If you just want to look out for other people classified as black, whoopee. Study everything. It is a gigantic world. And we don't even do a good job studying black people. Like, man. Anyway, let's see. The Mia Love, oh man. Condolences to her family, cowbell. Yeah, she married a white person. Tragic. And extra tragic, being deceased at 49. Maybe being married to an attempted white or suspected race soldier. Maybe that contributed to her being deceased at 49. Directly, indirect, even all of the flack that I'm sure she got about that arrangement. Either way, 49, that's the thing that just, wow. System of white supremacy is not designed to have black people in particular, non-white people in general, in good health, like at all. And even, I guess, former Congresswoman Mia Love, she might be one of them pretend black people. She definitely does not have 8 black grandparents born in Mississippi. So, and see, it'll even get narrative. See, we just focus on us, and us is black people that's got 8 black great-grandparents, and come on. But Mia Love, not with us anymore, victim of white supremacy at 49. That urgency, that's what we can look forward to. Not being here very long, not being in good health, and then deuces. I said, too, her being in racially restricted Utah. They don't even have black people out in Utah. The Church of Latter-day Saints, they didn't even allow niggers to join. That would have been impossible. If this had been like, 40 years previously, 50 years previously, she couldn't have even joined. She would have had to stay Catholic or whatever. Whew. God bless her. Mia Love. No lie. 2025 has been hard. Feels like that's every day. George Foreman. People that aren't even that old. George Foreman. Mia Love. Angie Stone. It's just every day. Man. Anywho. The section on the EPA and the cuts Trump has been making, saying, hey, I guess we're no longer about so-called climate change, and we are about efficient energy, and that's kind of repurposing the mission of the Environmental Protection Agency. That one I would not have paid maybe as much attention to, but Harriet A. Washington, that's another one I would not have said yikes if Sheena Scarborough said, we don't listen to that Harriet A. Washington, a terrible thing to waste. Like, oh, all right. Right on. That's great book. Suggestions like in my top 10, like right on. Maybe that'll be a twofer. Then they'll say, oh, you read Medical Apartheid too? We'll listen to that one too. Woo! But I would not have paid as much attention to the EPA report. But then having read all of that, the study we've done since then, that has a big impact on Freddie Gray. I hope I would have at least remembered that when they got to talk about, hey, the Environmental Protection Agency, we're the ones who to say, you got so much lead in the water, that's toxic. We're not always happy with them because I think they might have been involved with 9/11 and lying about the air quality. So, we don't want to go overboard. But still, Freddie Gray, before things ended poorly in 2015, lead poisoning, lots of that, Baltimore, privileged black folks, all the wonderful services that are to be offered in that part of Maryland. Trump told us. But that is kind of important. Really what I thought of in that segment, California again, because they just had a report in the LA Times yesterday where they were talking about they have temporarily lifted a lot of the laws regarding environmental protections when you go to rebuild or build new structures. I guess you're supposed to, have certain guarantees to make sure that you're doing so in a manner that's not going to add a whole lot of poison and toxins to the land, air, water, that a lot of those regulations are being waived so that people can rebuild quickly. They've had so much of that. They've been talking about how they're not testing soil samples before they allow people to move back in. And I'm saying, wait a minute now, are we, going to find out 10, 15 years later, like, oh my God, y'all got all kinds of lung cancer and, ooh, people after the wildfires, they live about 10 years less than they did with what, and they are doing a 10-year study on the health impact of these wildfires. So we shall see. But they've been having all these discussions and what sort of impacts this going to have on children, people with asthma, all of that. At this moment, we've been having all these episodes, everything that just, went down in North Carolina, and they're still struggling from all of that. At this moment, we need to gut FEMA, EPA, folks that are saying, hey, making sure people are safe. Dr. Cambon said cesspoolians pollute the entire planet. They even were talking about the Pacific Ocean being polluted with all the debris from the wildfires. You got wind and then it rains and it runs off into the ocean and all that. And saying, oh my goodness, it might toxify the food chain in the Pacific Ocean because of all of this. Cesspoolians. You just add that to the DDT that they had piled up off the Pacific Ocean coast anyway. Cesspoolians. And particularly, I was even thinking, you do this deliberately on a planet if you think, hey, our population percentage of white people is going down, if that's true or not, even if we think those numbers are threatened, and or if we think the population of non-white people is increasing, hey, we just poison the whole planet. No, we're going to kill off a whole lot of them. Let's see. And I even that might be the similar thinking with the vaccines. Now, I'm going to have to think about this anymore. I'm certainly not a medical professional, not even close. But all this about the vaccines, we talked about this with Dr. Welsing a decade before COVID-19. This was in the newspapers. They were talking about this, and they were saying it's not just white people, it is wealthy white people. At this time, they weren't saying Republicans. They were just saying it's well-off white people, even right here in Seattle, saying, I don't want no measles vaccine. And saying that now you got large pockets of that. In fact, I even remember when COVID started erupting 2020, they were saying that there was a convergence of the anti-vaxxers and the white supremacists coming together. In, I guess, the white defiant, you don't tell me what to do, and yeah, I didn't want to do the needle anyway, and yeah, you don't tell us what to do, you tell those black people what to do, and yeah. In the report that we heard, they were saying Republicans, they've been doing that for a few years now. They don't say white people are the ones that don't want to do these vaccines and all that, because I don't really know hordes of black people. I knew black people, yes, I heard black people, they didn't want to get the COVID vaccine and all that, but I'm really not aware of large numbers of black people or black, social media groups or anything like that where we're not doing no vaccines. I haven't heard no C.O.W.S listeners talk about that over the years, or people email me about that. And I mean, like I said, it was people who had concerns about the COVID vaccine specifically, not vaccines in general. And I'm not doing no vaccines, and I'm not doing them for my child. And I just do not. If you all are aware of this, please inform me. I do not hang out with Leroy and Lakeisha. I live in Seattle, so you can let me know. But that would be very surprising to me. I am very aware and have seen many reports, lots of evidence in my state and beyond of white people, the anti-vaxxers. I'm very aware. That would be news to me if it was, people that look like Al Sharpton also say, I don't do no measles vaccine. Get on out of here. Get on out of here. Hey, what? Still learning. Let's see. Incidentally, about all that about white people not wanting that vaccine, that reminded me, we had Berkeley Friends, white woman, as a guest on the program, and she talked about her work as an epidemiologist and how white people, when they found out, we supposed to mask up for the niggers because Leroy might get the COVID. I'm not doing that. and making that more salient to white people, the racial disparities and all that made them even more defiant about taking the Rona seriously. Berkeley Friends in the archives, end of 2022. Let's see. The report about the nude fakes and this being a big problem for children. I prefaced that report with a little snippet from the movie Afraid. This is a fictional movie where it says, this is Iris Pike. And she's like, whoa. And this is a non-white female. She says, whoa, what did you do? You took that picture? And she's talking to her white boyfriend, Cowbell, like Mia Love, right? And she's talking to her white boyfriend in this film. And he says, it was this dumb app that Squid had. And we were just messing around. And we took the picture and we made the video. And it's a video of her engaged in all this pornographic material. And then they send the video to the entire high school. And she's like, oh my God, my life is over. And her friends have been texting her and writing on social media and stuff. Oh, you whore. And plus, this is a non-white female, so-called Asian. So, so she said, I need to call the principal. Now, I didn't let the scene continue in the movie. She says, I need to call the principal. And her white boyfriend, he says, oh, no. Don't do that. Oh, there was this guy. Man, they rescinded his admission to Harvard just because they had a video. He was singing along on this song, and he said the N-word. And she says, you think they'll do that to me? He doesn't say anything. She says, oh, you're thinking about yourself. And it goes from there. But this is the second time I've used a clip from that movie. The first time I clipped from Afraid, they had just got the new AI set up for the house. They were going to put their children to bed. Oh, and it's the same dynamic. It's a non-white father with a white mom. They're going to put their mulatto child to bed. And the house AI says, oh, I got it. They're on a point system. If they go to bed early, they get points and they can, get prizes or whatever later in the week. So the non-white child is going to go to bed. And he's like, I'm not going to bed. So he gets in bed and he gets out his device and he's playing the shoot 'em up, bang, bang game. And then all of a sudden the screen locks and says, you're out of screen time for the day. And so the little child says, oh man, what in the filth, Florin, filth? And the computer pops on, the AI pops in and says, language, stop all that. And he says, oh, my fault. And so the computer says, oh, filth, Florida, I don't care. And so the non-white child says, hey, man, you think you can give me some more screen time? And so the AI says, okay, but it'll be our secret. And he turns the game back on. He says, pew, 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 and he keeps shooting. That's the end of the scene. Now, I played at that time when they had the report. The child, he was using the AI program, and I think it was the same dynamic. The screen locked. He couldn't get any more screen time, and the child was filth. And the screen said, I tell you what, if you want some more screen time, you know what to do? Let's kill your mom and dad. And the parents found, I'm like, whoa, we didn't bought the That was the time I played Afraid before. That white people, sometimes the movies, coming attractions. Indeed, that is one you will not leave and go, wow, this technology is going to be great. If anything, be like, oh my God, I'm so thankful I do not have children. They said 1 in 17 children nude deepfaked. Wow. They said 1 in every classroom. They got 30 children in some classrooms. That means 2. Whoa. Have you talked to your child about all of this? Same thing Sheena Scarborough said, like, woo, these social media and the phones and all that. We had said maybe wait as long as possible. As long as possible. Yeah, I talked to him about Sade Robinson and then the 764 group. They groom you to kill yourself, or same thing I just said, kill your parents. Now, they said it's not a white supremacist group, it's so-called interracial, whatever that means. But then when they got to the end, they said the ones that are the most violent, they're the white supremacists, of course. What in the world? Like, I said, if you're going to have children, you have so much to think about and research. And I would be going and talking to other parents. When did you give your child a phone? What has been the result? What have been the problems? If you had it to do over again, or if you had multiple children. So the first time around, what age did you give your child a phone? What was the result? Did you have any problems? The next time around, did you do the same thing? Or did you make changes? Did you wait a little bit longer? Did you put, different guidelines, different restrictions on how long they can have the phone? Did you give them a dumb phone? Ask and see. Hopefully you will live around engaged parents where they really put some thought into this and really have been observant about how their child has developed with this phone and if they've had problems. Hopefully it won't be, you go to ask them, they say, wait a minute, I got to get I'm on the TikTok here. They got this. That also is the big one that they've said, like regardless of whatever policies and rules you put in, you can't be on the phone all day long and think they're not going to be doing the same thing or biding their time until they can. So, lots to think about and maybe even see if they got some literature that you can read so you all can think about this. You, as attempted parents, can process what's going to be our device plan and our phone plan. And, man, it's a lot to think about before you get to the bedroom, see? You don't have to have the children also, see? Let's see. And they said when they talk about the 764 group, and they said this is for the zip code in Texas of presumably the young white fellow who created this group. I have to verify this is a young white person. They said he got an 80-year sentence. An 80 years. I had to go see, what is this? Because I'd never heard of this group till I heard this report. But in the interview, it said the 764 members, they began to make demands that were very dark. What does that mean? Come on, man. Particularly since I suspect there's a lot of white people. Come on, man. That's no metaphors. Say that all the time. The metaphors consistently, invariably, they support the system of white supremacy racism, where everything that is vile, dastardly, is associated with melanin, black people, and or just the color black, darkness, and conversely, everything that is white, light, is bright, right, innocent, pure, godlike. Just, come on, at least we can just be but they started to make violent demands, perverse demands, ungodly demands. I think all of those would be much more accurate ways of stating it. Again, it's the same thing. It's so cliche. It was a dark day and dark demands and a dark figure and dark episode. Come on. We got all that. Let's just be more specific. Don't just use the same old hat ways of speech, right? You got a brain computer, you can be more creative. A lot of these people, you get paid to hold the microphone or to write. You're supposed to be creative, have innovative ways of catching our attention, not just, yes, it was a dark day, and it was a dark time, and dark deeds, and dark peoples. Let's see. Oh, and the sentences in California, I'm so glad they put the numbers on it, although I don't really think the problem is that people are ignorant or unconscious, as they said at the UC Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. I don't think it's unconscious bias and all the rest of it that adequately explains when you get 15 white dudes, robbery, murder charges, and 13 of them get parole. You got 12 Leroy's robbery, murder charges, 11 of them life, no parole. That is not an accident. And you see the same parameter or the same dynamic, death row penalty, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Everything that is bad is associated with black people, what I just said. Everything that is about redemption and innocence. What is it? I'm starting over a new pale leaf. Turning over, that's what they say. I'm turning over a new pale leaf. And walk out of here like Andy Dufresne. That's right. San Diego, man, come on, man. They don't need to. I don't know how much money they invest in UC Berkeley Center for Law and all that. They took all that and just give it to the pillars of the community. And Layla Aziz, where she said she came back and she was looking for some homies and folks. She'd go to the beach in San Diego. I love San Diego. She'd go to the beach and say, "Where are my homies? The privileged black males, everybody they're all in jail. Oh, they're not just in jail. They life with no parole in jail. Like, dang, my privileged black brothers, they don't get no second chance. They just say, you're a recidivist. There's no hope for you. Got to lock them up and throw away the key. Just like Red in Shawshank. What they say about Red? They said Red, the only guilty man in Shawshank. Mr. Fuller's favorite. Anyway, number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I was taken aback twice in that clip about the paroles in San Diego, California. The first time was when they said the race soldier, when they get parole, you're still innocent as pure snow, and Andy Dufresne. They said the race soldier, he killed a black dude and bragged about it. I'm going to get my bolts. They said that's white supremacist lingo. You get tatted up or what have you. You got notch on you. You brag about it. They brag about it. They brag that I killed that coon, that Leroy. Ooh. But he got parole. See? That was one. Then they talked to Linda Whitley. And she said she's trying to get her privileged black male son out of prison. Poor Leroy. Not going to get out. And she said Miss Whitley, she's trying to do the best she can, advocate for her child. She doesn't understand parole. She wasn't taught to read. It took me a moment. I normally delay a little bit, cooning around or whatever. But when she said, Miss Whitley, I wasn't taught to read. I try to advocate for my son. I want to get him out. And, maybe the folks up UC Berkeley Center for Law and Technology, they can help me and figure out some of this. But I don't even really know what parole means because I'm illiterate. Whew. The person, what I immediately thought, Catherine Massey Book Club. The people most to blame for that are classified as white. Didn't we just have Dr. Wiegand on the program in silence or indifference? Matter of fact, Irie in Louisiana, even though this is California, she said they were doing the literacy program because it seemed like they had noticed some sort of correlation between the young people that were illiterate, young people who commit acts of violence. That seems reasonable to me, Might be a more frustrating lived experience if you can't read. But that's what came to mind when they were talking with Miss Whitley, and she's talking about her child. Even that same pattern that they're studying to see if it's a correlation where, dang, so you've got a black parent, she's illiterate, she ends up with a child in prison, no chance for parole. Now, how much of a correlation do you think exists there? You think if she'd known how to read, maybe that might have lessened the likelihood of her offspring being in greater confinement. Can't, draw direct connection between 1 and 2, but I mean, reading is important. I mean, even as something small as maybe if Miss Whitley could read, she would know what parole is. Now, that might not help her deal with the race soldiers who get to decide, oh yeah, we got 12 Leroys, 11 of them, life, no parole. And then the other side, we got 15 race soldiers, killed a Leroy and bragged about it. He said, give them 7 years, and they didn't even have to serve all of that. Wow. What does it mean to be white? And then, in my view, the worst of all that, you do all this for years. It's not like they just started doing this 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You've been doing this for as long as anybody can remember. Don't get to the end of all this and tell me that, oh man, white people are just ignorant and unawares and they're unconscious and just got all this colorblind bias and all that. Come on, man. Like if those statistics looked any other way, white people from Simi Valley to San Francisco would riot. If those statistics looked any other way. Any hoodles. *61 for the folks who have commentary. Let us see. Lost the switchboard. Give me a moment. See if I can relocate that. The reading thing staggered me towards the end, man. And again, I can't emphasize it enough. I don't have, that could be me with Miss Webb. People who've heard me on the program might say, Gus don't sound that literate himself. That might be true. But man, that is white people's fault for sure, because they did that for so many generations. Say for sure, we don't intend for you niggers to read nothing. That's how we withhold information. You're not going to read nothing. If you get a teacher in school, we might send you a teacher. They don't know how to read neither. And then we're not going to give you no books. I just said, in silence or indifference, we intend to have whole generations of you niggers don't read a sentence, can barely spell your name. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, if you have commentary to share, proceed.
Can I be heard?
Mama C, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Gus. Hi, Cows listeners. I have just a couple things to share. The first one is West Coast, East Coast. We're on fire. I'm here in South Carolina. In the early part of March, there were wildfires in Myrtle Beach area. About 2,000 acres were on fire. I think it said there's about 55% of it is contained. But last weekend in upstate South Carolina, 4 teenagers started a fire in Table Rock State Park in Pickens, South Carolina. It was then that the Governor McMaster issued a statewide ban, I think in South and North Carolina, for a burn ban. In Table Rock State Park, it's a beautiful place to go hiking or camping, beautiful waterfalls, terrain, there's a lake, campgrounds, all of that fun stuff. But this fire has amounted to the worst in the state of South Carolina's history. It's really bad. The smoke is far stretching. We're pretty close to it. But the smoke is stretching pretty far across the state into North Carolina as well. So we've got Myrtle Beach in northeast South Carolina, and then Pickens County, which is northwest South Carolina. And this area, as well as North Carolina, is still recovering from Hurricane Helene, which happened late September, early October of 2024. So many trees were uprooted or broke in half, that they were uprooted from the tree bulb or the root bulb. And a lot of this debris, many of the crews or volunteers, they would focus on the residential areas or commercial areas, clearing the roads, helping people escape their homes. Yeah, so of course the woods or the natural parts of the area would be the last to be cleared. So yeah, they've cleared some of it for hiking, removing debris off of the trails and everything. But I went up into the mountains just last weekend at a different part of the area of mountains. And I noticed that the leaves were very crunchy. I like to call it crunchy leaf season, often associated with fall weather. The leaves were very dry, underbrush very dry. The twigs and stuff would just snap underneath your step. So because of the high winds of spring and the dry conditions, it was the perfect opportunity for a quick burn or a slow smoldering burn of the underbrush. So far over the last week, over 10,000 acres have burned and 0% has been contained, meaning that even though they've sent out all this manpower, they have planes, sending down like flame retardants on the trees, and they've got firefighters trying to use a variety of techniques to stop the burn or prevent it from spreading. There's just so much area that the fires are burning that if they stop some of the burn in this area, then the fires are going in a different direction. And so they consider 0% contained as far as it's continuing to grow. So once they have stopped the fires from spreading, then they consider that as, containment. And then they'll start working to extinguish those fires. But in addition to the 10,000s in Table Rock, there's an additional 2,000 acres in the Persimmons Ridge fire. Not sure exactly where that is, but they're saying 24% has been contained. And based on the media coverage, I 100% suspect that all 4 of these teenagers were white people whose futures would be in jeopardy if their identities were revealed. This society will protect them at all costs, despite the historic destruction of forestry and the number of people who've needed to volunteer or go to work, overtime and all of that, as well as the equipment needed to stop the spread and protect homes and animals and the natural forestry. So I will provide a couple comments on some of the stories that were shared. Just PSA for anybody who is considering getting pregnant or who is pregnant. You must be dedicated to eating a variety of foods while pregnant. It's pretty cool, but the baby samples all the foods and all the tastes that you enjoy throughout the pregnancy, unless you have severe nausea and you throw up everything, which I myself did not, but I know that some people do suffer with that. But now that the baby's here, she eats a variety of things. Some people are like, oh, my toddler won't eat anything and just will eat chicken nuggets, or like the broadcast story said, just basic things like candy and donuts and chicken nuggets. So, the toddler, she'll eat like broccoli and beets and asparagus and can recognize cucumbers and eat them, avocados, variety of fruits, of course. So pretty much whatever you eat or model eating, even if you don't like it particular, they will try it, they will eat it. And the more you introduce it, the more accustomed they are to eating it. And I think it's important, especially if you want your child to be like a world traveler or kind of amenable to other cultures. So if you want to keep them where they are, just don't just keep to eating, a limited amount of food. But if you want to broaden their horizons and their possibilities to go beyond even where you've gone, then you have to expose them to other foods and try new foods yourself. Okay, so South Carolina is a very interesting place. So I will respond to what Gus has said about the immunizations. For our baby, we had her in a birthing center with a midwife. We opted with a certified nurse practitioner, midwife, pediatric midwife, who gave us information on the immunizations and all of that, but respected our choices in that we wanted to do a delayed immunization schedule for the toddler. I didn't have a set date when I wanted to, begin immunizing the baby. I didn't really mind waiting until much later. But now that the baby is 2, a little older than 2, I respected non-Clemson's dad's request to, or decision to get the main immunizations for the baby, like MMR, polio, or the DTaP. So we booked an appointment this week, and we go to like the county health board or whatever with that appointment. When we get in there, the nurse practitioner, I felt a lot of medical pressure. We sit down, and then the nurse, the first thing she says is the toddler needs about 8 immunizations that day. And then she proceeds to give us multiple Center for Disease Control, CDC pages, providing an overview of each disease, the risk of catching it for each of the target groups, as well as other information. And I guess she expected us to read on the spot. I was like, do you want us to read all this? And overwhelmed, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I just declined and said that we only wanted what we came in for, which was the two vaccinations. The nurse asked if we wanted one of those vaccinations, which would be polio, if we wanted the 3-in-1, which was DTaP, polio, and hepatitis. I don't know if it's A or B, but I declined because that seemed like a lot for the day. So I assume that for the staff, they're looking at it as, oh, if we combine all these dosage into one injections, then it's much easier for the staff to administer multiple doses, one shot, boom, boom, boom. Plus, it's easier for the families because they don't have to come back as often and remember they got other things that they're worried about. So I get it. But I was like, nope, this is what I had in mind. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I agreed to in my mind, or we agreed on together. So I'm going to decline it. So we had to sign off on the immunizations. We had declined. I'm guessing they're probably going to send CPS after us or something if there's an outbreak. But anyway, so I'm still kind of nursing the baby whenever she's interested in that. So I was like, okay, this should be easy to keep her calm. So I just held her in my arms and I nursed her, and the nurse quickly, did the first injection, and the baby was kind of horrified, like she had a shocked look on her face, like what is going on? But she continued nursing and she was fine. So breastfeeding saved the day. Woo woo. And they have these new needles that have a spring in them, similar to what you find if you disassemble a ballpoint pen. The needle retracts immediately after injecting the dose. So I guess it's a safety measure given all the dirty needle crisis that we have in this society. I, for one, am a little bit suspect about the immunization schedule, like how many doses they require for children to have all at once. I am a proponent for the delayed schedule. I'm not one for, injecting children so often, so early on. But again, if you are planning on enrolling your child in childcare, either private or like Head Start or government-based education, then they will require your immunizations, or they kind of pressure you into doing it because there's going to be a lot of children there. But for us and our family, we don't have our baby in childcare, so I was like, okay, if this is what I want, then this is what I'm going to have to do. The baby's got to stay at home. So again, I see if the family has limited time, limited resources to get to all these appointments, as often as I would want to go back and get the immunizations, I understand why they would get the 3 to 8 doses per appointment. And what was crazy about it was I was thinking you just get one injection for, let's say, polio, and you're done. No, polio has like four doses. Yeah, I think it was 4 doses for polio and 2 for MMR. And then, for the other ones, they have multiple doses to get the full immunization. I was like, whoa. So that kind of blindsided me. I attempted prior to doing this appointment, I had a little hesitancy, but I attempted to, quote, do my research. But the topic on immunization is so polarized that you will find evidence to support whatever position you want to take, or you'll find websites or documentaries and all that stuff to support whatever side you want. So I think you just have to like tune into yourself and just figure out what's best for you, because it's too muddled to be able to get clarity on it. And with that, I will end my share. Thank you.
Muddled. Race soldiers love it. Muddled. Confusion, where it's difficult to figure out what confusion. I do love the beats for the little folks. Beats are on the superfoods. Like when we read, matter of fact, Countdown with Shayna Swan. We read that one, and then we had as a guest on the program Judith Finlayson. She told us about you are what your grandparents ate. Tremendous information in the text, right? She was on the program 2021. But all of that is about, for generations, you have to eat well if you want your child to be healthy. And that's like in so many layers. You even have to eat well if you want your grandchildren to be healthy. And then certainly that's even talked about. That's in Shayna Swan's book, Countdown. We read that in the book club. And then Judith and Layson, if you're going to have children, get that diet together. That the male, female, everybody, get your diet together. You do not want to be going through the whole 9 months eating donuts and chicken nuggets and cheeseburgers and French fries and tater chips like that, and then you end up with exactly what you talked about. You have children. That's all they eat: chicken nuggets, donuts, potato chips, because that's all you ate during the pregnancy. Get your diet together, and then model. Same thing I said with the phones. Model, and I've seen that. I don't have offspring, but I have seen that, and I've experienced that myself, where small children, like 1, 2, you eat, I eat. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if I've seen it before. It might be the worst thing ever, ickiest thing ever. You might not even like it that much, but you eat, I eat. And that's especially mom, dad. Oh, for sure. You eat, I eat. So if you're eating potato chips, donuts, cheeseburgers, fried chicken, Popeyes, that's what they're going to eat. You get those beets, Brussels sprouts, bok choy. Hey, not too bad. Very, very, get away from that red dye, number 5, and all the rest of it. Very important. That's important too. She talked about being pressured, going with those immunizations where she, non-Clemson dad, had already made their decision. They'd already, hey, this is what we want. Talked it over, done our research, and then they're going to try and pressure us to get every shot. Come on. And they will do that. They put on those white lab coats, start talking fast, and they bam, she said, hit you off that CDC literature, and ooh, you gonna get in trouble. And then sometimes they might be for real. We might come send CPS to come and, wag a finger at you. You derelict parents. We heard about you all. Pressure you, and, well, black self-respect. We discussed this. We made a decision as attempted parents. We're going to stick to our decision. You are not going to pressure us, bully us here with your white lab coat. White people try to do that in so many different scenarios. That's so important. If you've already made your decision and you're solid, hey, don't come in here trying to bully me. And, black self-respect, in my opinion. And that also, excellent point that with the vaccines, yes, you muddled, almost like with COVID-19, and a lot of that was with vaccines too, but muddled. Race soldiers love that environment. It would cause confusion. Difficult to ascertain what is true. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, proceed.
May I be heard?
Shamika Harris, yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Evening, everyone. Before I talk about the segments that played, I'd just like to talk about something that happened to me a little bit ago. I was at the gas station, and there was a white man parked in front of me, and he had a symbol on the rear window of his vehicle, and it was 3 interlocked triangles. Okay, I had never seen this symbol before. So I just asked him, hey, what is that symbol on your car? What does that mean? And when I asked him, he started speaking like he was nervous, and he acted like he was confused about what the symbol meant. Like, it's north, it's this and that, but he didn't tell me what it meant. And I just thought it was so weird because he acted like he was confused and nervous the way he talked to me about it. So, later on I thought about it and I Googled it, okay? And so apparently these 3 interlocked triangles, it's a Norse symbol that's supposed to be the knot of the slain or the knot of those fallen in battle. And it's, associated with Odin, the afterlife, and the interconnectedness of the 9 realms. But apparently it's been appropriated by white supremacists, particularly, and this is what the internet said, racist Odinists, ODINISTS, I guess people who worship Odin, and they're using it as a symbol of hate. That's what the internet said. So I just thought I would share that with you because it's like one of those things where if you see that on somebody's car driving around and you don't know what it is, you just might not give it a second thought. Racist symbol, I guess. And you guys were talking about the vaccines. I do think it's a good idea to try to spread them out. My mom, I think she gave me the vaccines according to whatever the schedule was. I did go to public school. I don't know. Seems like I turned out okay. I'm not really sure. But now when I get vaccines, sometimes they'll say you can get more than 1 at a time, like that's approved. But it is my general code to only get 1 vaccine at a time. That way, if I have some sort of side effects, I know which vaccine that is giving me those side effects. I don't have to wonder. That's just what I do. As far as the segments that were played today, I think the first one was about the Smithsonian, and they were talking about the Trump administration quite a bit. And I have noticed that, right at the beginning, it said something about anti-American ideology. And I think American means white, so they don't want any anti-white ideology. And another thing I've noticed, whenever Trump starts to talk about what it is that he's opposed to, he'll just start describing himself or whatever it is that he does, right? So whenever he's talking about something that he doesn't agree with or he doesn't like, he just starts describing himself all the time. Like they said, divisive, race-centered ideology. I guess that's what they didn't want for the Smithsonian, but seems like that's exactly what Trump and his followers, that's what they want. divisive, race-centered ideology. Just white people to be the center. They said they didn't want to spend any money on degrading shared American values. And again, I'm not exactly sure what the American values are, besides racism, white supremacy. Also, it said he didn't want to perpetuate a false reconstruction of American history. Again, that seems like exactly what Trump and this administration seems like that's what they're doing. They're lying all the time, constant lies, and then, they'll call their lies the truth. It's just, it can be really confusing if you have, I don't think white people are confused, but I think some non-white people see it and they're confused by it. The Native American human remains, the lady who was talking about it, she said it's a very crucial conversation, one that is very urgent for all of us, but has been on the back burner for too long. Metaphor. And see, that right there seems contradictory. I don't know, which one is it? Is it urgent for all of us, which I don't think is urgent for white people to get non-white people's remains back to their descendants, or has it been on the back burner for too long? Mia Lane, I don't know. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about that one. Project 2025. They were talking about the programming, the information, the media, or whatever. And they said right adjacent programs. It's 85% of them. And even the ones that are supposed to be non-political, like sports analysis, that even those are actually right-leaning, even though it's branded as non-political. No one ever says racist, just right-leaning, conservative, stuff like that. 23andMe, the line that I thought was notable is the lady asked a question. Well, it wasn't a question. She said, imagine a world where 23andMe data is acquired by an insurance company. That is, something that should be thought about. And I know lots of people who just given their DNA to these companies like it's nothing. That is valuable. It's private, and it seems like people don't care about privacy anymore. The EPA just changing the mission from protecting the environment to American energy dominance. That is, wow. Even, I don't know, dominance. That was quite the word choice right there. And I think a lot of non-white people, white people too, but mostly non-white people, are going to continue to be victimized by all of these chemical plants and hog farms and all of these sorts of things, giving non-white people really high levels of cancer and diseases and things. And it looks like there will be no respite for that, no decrease in the immediate future. They also said carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases are a direct threat to human health. That's what the EPA said some years ago. And now Lee Zeldin has said he wants to, go back and look at that statement again and possibly undo it. RFK Jr., the way he's been acting about these, not just the measles vaccines, he's just, I don't know. Seems really dangerous. And they were talking about it was a very real concern about the widespread outbreak of measles. And I would be concerned about that. And it seems like most of the people who have died from measles are unvaccinated young people. So that's something to consider. And they also were talking about even older people, the timing. If you got your vaccines at a certain time, you might need to get them, get revaccinated. So that's kind of scary. 764. I had never heard about that at all. And they said it was the darkest, most depraved corner of the net. And they called them neo-Nazi satanic network of extremists. And they deliberately target kids. And just so many of the things I heard, they just were, I don't know, flabbergasting, astounding. I mean, the police said they, they'll keep their eye out for the little girl, but legally they can't bring her back to the house. Things like that. Or, they go take the phone and the computer to the police and, we can't figure it out. We don't have the right passwords. But I don't know. Just the whole time, they were talking about the fascination among members with mass acts of violence, especially ones related to racism. And the whole time I was listening to that segment, I'm like, dang, does this show that white people care about children? And it didn't. The Brooklyn thing where the white teenagers beat up the black teenager, the newscaster, he said several teens who appear to be white, he wouldn't call them white people, he said they appear to be white, are beating up black teens. He ain't say a teen who appears to be classified as black. That's not what he said. And also it said they threw a banana at him. So, was that premeditated? They left their house with a banana planning to beat up a person classified as black. And the police did not release their names or ethnic backgrounds. I think that means racial classification. I don't know. Police don't hesitate to give the names of black children or their racial classification. They'll put their picture up. Even if they don't call them black, they'll put their picture up so hey, this is a black person we're talking about. So all these precautions and stuff only they get taken with white children, white people, period, not just children. When they were talking about San Francisco and the disparity in sentences and charging, I did note that the young man, well, maybe not so young anymore, he was talking about the Lord has a plan for me in the near future. It's those are the kind of black people, it seems like you're reformed when you start talking about white Jesus and things like that. I also noted that they said bias doesn't mean the judge, attorney, or arresting officer are explicitly racist. So, very interesting. Also, I guess I have a question for Gus. If and when you go to Milwaukee, do you plan on doing some Jeffrey Dahmer research when you're there? That's my question for Gus. And that's all I have.
Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Absolutely. It's certainly the top priority is to cover the trial and, Sade Robinson. That is the reason for going. But how on earth could I be in Dahmer land and, not steal 5 minutes, maybe 25 minutes? I said, hey, see if you can find some of the folks who knew him, maybe, or were neighbors with him, or some of the relatives of the victims, or, whatever. Go to the chocolate factory. And then I think they might have one of those tacky, what do they call it? The tours, the true crime tours type thing. I wanted to see if they have one of those, because that might be interesting. Because, see, then I could go and talk to the white people on the tour, or even step back, affirm, is it white people on the tour? And then ask them questions. What do you do? You came? Where'd you come from? To do the Milwaukee tour? You came to Milwaukee to tour the Jeff Dahmer snacking on black people? Non-white people? The white people don't care about children. The Laotian boy, non-white. We read about that, Lyle and Dahmer. His dad said, Jeff, he's child rapist and monster. Killed people. And, he ate them. It's terrible. But I draw the line. He was not a racist. I don't know who said this about Jeff being racist. See, these judges locked up all these black people, no parole. I didn't say they was racist. Bias, but and not racist. And I know he ate all the folks and got the head, and I didn't say they were racist. What do you have to do to be a racist? How many people do you have to eat before they call you a racist? How many black people do you have to put in prison before they do that? That is a stone cold racist right there. I mean, they sat on the judge. She sat up there for a good 50 years. Boy, she locked up more black people. Jerome came in at 30 years. Bang. Life. Bang. That's a racist right there. How many, is it a number of years you have to do this before you're a racist? Anywho, let's see. I did have that thought when they talked about Miss White in Brooklyn, where they were talking about the white thugs who brutalized her child, Monique White, with a W-H-Y-T-E, appear to be white. I thought that was so curious. And I said, he didn't say that with the black child. But then I said, well, they talked to the mom, and she said that they were beating up black children. So it might have been that the mom, we identified as black, and she said her child was black. So, okay, we got that confirmed. But up here, I just thought that was, wow. Wow. Come on. If it had been the other way around, if it had been a gang of black whatever, and they had beat up a white person, pelted him with a can of suntan oil, I think we would have got names, pictures, parents' names. Anyway, other folks who dialed in, *61 with a hand up. Proceed.
May I be heard?
Caller at the courthouse in Florida. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners, and callers. Gus, I was thinking about that as well, where the victim was beaten. I think the mother said at least 2 or 3 times. I'm thinking, or 2 times, and I believe that was the segment where, I don't know if that was someone who's white. They said that the perpetrators, the thugs or whatever, they appear to be white. I noticed that. I think that's what was said, appear to be white. And I don't, I ain't never even really heard it said that way, I guess, for a report. But I think in the same way, if that was some black teenagers or whatever, black people that beat on a white person, I don't think they would have even phrased it that way. These appear to be some black teenagers. So I'm thinking, my goodness, what do you have to do to be labeled or to be described as a racist? And I noticed, I think another segment as well, where they said they tried to reach out to someone and they didn't get a response back. And I noticed that the mental health, I guess, excuse or I guess tactic gets mentioned, and they say, well, they don't have any empathy. They lack empathy or something like that. And, maybe they'll get some sympathy one day, and they just have to learn, and they don't know any better. It sounds like that act of racism is practiced as well. And I noticed where that was the mother that, I guess that was a white mother that was saying that the police department locally can get away to have some kind of counter force to find who these people are, that was getting her child to do these things or whatever. I suspect that is white supremacy as well, where they aren't going to do or say anything to get some other white people in trouble, I guess. That's what I thought of. And even going back to I think a banana was mentioned in one of the audio, I think, the victim. I thought about those banana, Krispy Kreme, donuts. And one last thing, Gus, from the job, that the literacy thing, my mom said it's some people that come up there and don't really know how to do the sign and print their names, or could read the paperwork, where they have to make restitution and paying on traffic tickets. So that's something that's coming up as well on the job. I wanted to share that. And other than that, that's all I have to share. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Man, now you want to talk about privilege. And now, much obliged to our caller at the courthouse in Florida. Now, you go to the courthouse for whatever document, passport, it's all kinds of business needs that you would need at the courthouse. CPS, we talked about that. Maybe white people come and put their finger in your face because you didn't vaccinate your children. Now you got to go to the courthouse. Man, you get up there and you can't read that well. They're ready to hit the panic button if you come up there and, don't have all your coins together to pay for your copies, or look like you might need to ask a question. One of that panic. You can't read? You need me to help you fill out what? I'm going to tell you what, system of white supremacy, racism, black brother, black sister, I would suspect it would be a lot of people classified as black who would not be patient if you came up there and couldn't read, would not be oh man, my black brother, man, the race soldiers, come on, we're going to get this form filled out and boom. You think they pay me to help you get shit with? Come on. Woo! And again, we talked about this in silence or indifference. Did we miss anybody? Anybody hand up? Oh, Irie with us. Let's see. Man.
Okay, yeah, I want to make it quick because I don't know the time you're in the program.
Oh, you're a little distorted. I don't know. Can you maybe get clearer? Or I don't know if you're on a headset or speakerphone, but it's not. It's very distorted. Oh, there we go. Much better.
I don't know. I got janky headphones. Yeah. So the segment about the white supremacist teenage group, that whole thing, the online self-mutilation thing. I don't know how long this has been going on, but I think it's been about a year, maybe two. I saw some movie. It was called Mandy. And in the movie, there was a group of suspected racists, but they were sadists and sadomasochists. So they made hobbies out of going around and killing people. But what was in particular about it that stood out to me, which I had to remember, was somebody told me years ago, art imitating life. They self-mutilated themselves in the movie. It's like they stuck prongs and nails and different things in like every inch of their bodies, and they just moved around like a rogue group, looking for people to torture and kill. And years before that, there was a video that I stumbled upon that I won't say the name, but it was, I looked it up thinking it was one thing. I was told about it by somebody that I would say was more confused than I am, and that person hung around with white people. And he referred to a video and a joke he was telling, and I looked it up, and it was a lot of sexual self-mutilating white men. It was very gory and graphic. and apparently it was done for, I guess, sexual pleasure, as well as like just I don't know. I don't know, because I don't feel like we're dealing with complete human beings when it comes to racists. I'm just being honest. So when I heard that about that group and hearing that they are urging people to do videos of self-mutilation and animal cruelty and all this other stuff, I'm just like, how many more are there? And I don't know what the solution. It sounds like this woman's daughter needs to be completely removed from the society that she's used to living in, because as long as she has access to the internet, she's going to always be susceptible to some type of abusive, coercive type of interaction, you know. And I also remember being in school one day, and there was this young lady that kept wanting to go to the bathroom, and it's like 7th grade. And I was like, she asked me another time. I said, girl, no, like, you're not going back to the bathroom. You just went. Like, this is your second time. I don't like, for students especially, I don't want to ask, do you have an issue with, you know, bathroom use or whatever. So I'll let a female go because of female reasons. But after the third time of her asking, I'm like, I'm not doing it. So then that's when her friend, and these are non-white students, black female, apparently. And so her friend started talking really loud where I could hear her. And she was like, I would tell Miss Irie that my friend is going to the bathroom to cut herself, but I don't want my friend to have to go to the hospital. And I said, wait, is that what's happening here? Like, she was like, yeah, she's taking scissors to the bathroom and she's cutting herself. And she's done this before. I just don't want her to have to go to the hospital. And I had to tell her, listen, I have no choice but to let somebody know this. Like, because she could bleed out and die. Is that, we don't want that. I don't know if I told that story before. I may have years ago. It's been years since it happened, but all that stuff came to mind. And I know a student now, she's graduated, and she just found out that she was in special education. Nobody told her. And the thing she went through, being put up for adoption and then being with a foster caregiver, being put in special education but never having her emotional needs met. She's really confused. She calls herself them instead of her. And she was cutting herself too. That's a very big, or should I say, it's more replete in this society than people would think. Thank you.
Much obliged, Irie. Wow, that is throwaway children indeed. I just, my theory, I have to think a little bit more, but I think, one, this seems like a long-running component of white culture in terms of self-mutilation. They even incorporated into a lot of their sexual acts and brag about it, call it BDS and bondage and, you know, all of that. White culture, I was going to relate this to white genetic annihilation, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, because I think all of this stems from they are not satisfied with how they look, and I think it might be an increase, because Irie was saying it seems like there's more of this behavior being expressed now. I would have to think more. This is not rooted in deep scientific study, so I'm just processing, still learning, and still thinking about this. But this might be connected to what Dr. Welsing said about end-stage white supremacy, in terms of more and more white people feeling that sense of threat or vulnerability about the system and or their numbers, population numbers of people classified as white, whether or not this is based in truth or not, if they feel some sort of anxiety about all this, or increasing populations of dark people, this might be one of the ways that their anxiety is expressed. Lots of self-mutilation, and it's, you know, mutilation of the skin, right? Cutting and that sort of thing. I think that might be one manifestation of end-stage white supremacy, white genetic anxiety or white genetic annihilation and anxiety about all of this on the part of people classified as white. I have to think on it more. Anywho, we did our 3 hours scooch over. We should be here tomorrow, Tuesday. I have to confirm both, especially for Tuesday. You're not going, we pranked him. I don't, so we'll confirm, make sure for both 8 p.m. We do same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I have Miss Scarborough's both voice in my head now when I do the time. She said, man, I'm in Wisconsin. We're Central. I don't do all that math. I said, yes, ma'am. 7 p.m. Central. That's the time we broadcast always. Tomorrow, today, yesterday, book club, 7 p.m. Central. Reading. More reading. I told you that has been in my brain computer a little bit more, like especially after reading In Silence or Indifference, that, wow, white people intended for us to be, that's what they intended, for us to be going to the courthouse. I can't fill out the form. Put my child in greater confinement for life, no parole. I don't even know what parole means. That is exactly, when the program ends, that my conditioning has been conditioned, that is exactly what white people intended. That is why reading is more important than watching television. Catherine Massey Book Club every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific. Reading. They even had a report. They were talking about therapists prescribing reading for therapy. Reading. You could even read. Find some elders or black people that struggle with reading and help them learn to read. Read to them and that sort of thing. And start a book club. Anyway, we'll be here. We'll see tomorrow and then Tuesday. Sobriety would be best. Now, they're going to poison everything, then we'll need to add to that by going and get cigarettes and Mad Dog 2020. Drink a little bit more water. Sobriety. Protect that brain computer. They said that for some of these sentences, say, hey, man, you're 25. Your brain hasn't even fully developed until you're 25 years old. You commit these crimes at 18 and 17. When you have all your brain faculties. Yet exactly that age group, you especially sobriety. No reefer either. They say that too. No reefer. Sober. Creator. Help us maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Help us stop wasting non-white people's time and energy, including our own. Minimize contact, minimize conflict. Stop name-calling black people. Stop being discourteous to black people. Stop gossiping. Stop producing throwaway offspring. Jeff Dahmer used to get non-white people with the liquor. He would go to the bars and slip something in their drink and all that. That's what I said. Saying I had totally forgot about that. He was going to the bars. I think they have a bar that is dedicated to Jeff Dahmer in Milwaukee. That alone. I don't drink nothing, especially not with no white people. Non-white people will slip a Mickey in your drink too. And they say that about old Bill Cosby. And they say, that's what they said about old Bill Cosby? No. I don't. Sobriety would be best. We cut all that off at the knees. You ain't going to swango me because I don't do no drinking. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Man. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.